Good evening. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being webcast on Comcast TV Channel 15 and live streamed on the city's YouTube channel at https://www.youtube.com/user/City of Hayward and on the city website at https://hayward.legistar.com/calendar.aspx. The mayor will call upon members of the city council, city staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they state their names before giving comments or remarks. Individuals participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. City council members and members of the public participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature, and the mayor will call upon them at the appropriate time. Members participating via teleconference wishing to speak should dial *9, and they will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received by email at list-mayor-council@hayward-ca.gov, city clerk at hayward-ca.gov, or via e-comment by 3 p.m. will be distributed to the city council and staff, published on the city's meeting and agenda center under documents received after published agenda, and entered into the record. Documents received after 3 p.m. through the adjournment of the meeting will be included as part of the meeting record and published the following day. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. In order to get the full Zoom experience, please make sure your application is up to date. Public members wishing to speak with the City Council can send an email to list-mayor-council@hayward-ca.gov or cityclerk@hayward-ca.gov.
Okay, thank you. And with that, good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the Hayward City Council to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Councilmember Zermenio this evening.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Present.
Councilmember Marquez.
Present.
Councilmember Salinas.
Present.
Councilmember Wahab.
Here.
Councilmember Zermenio.
I am present.
Mayor Halliday.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. All of our members of our council are present. And we'll now proceed to the closed session announcement, and I'll turn this over to our city attorney, Mr. Lawson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Council convened in closed session at 5:30 today, pursuant to Brown Act posted notice. With all members present and no public speakers, the Council discussed 3 matters. 1, as to pending litigation, Barnes versus the City of Hayward, Council discussed and took no reportable action. 2, as to city center property transactions, the Council discussed but took no reportable action. And 3, finally, as to Route 238 Parcel Group 5 property transactions, the Council discussed but took no reportable action, and the closed session adjourned at 6:47 p.m. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our special presentation this evening. And think we're actually a little bit late on this, but I think it's the thought that counts, not the timing of this proclamation. But this is a proclamation to declare the month of January 2022 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And we do this every year. And it's a really important thing that we do this and that people keep in mind that they need to be on the lookout for people who may be in trouble, and that there are resources and services available in our community to help people who have been victims of this. So, whereas human trafficking is a form of abuse in which force, fraud, or coercion is used to control victims for the purpose of commercial, sexual, or labor exploitation, affecting people of all gender, age, and background. And whereas the impact of human trafficking is wide-ranging, and whether domestic or international, victims experience trauma, violence, manipulation, fraud, and coercion at the hands of their traffickers. And it is often the most vulnerable members of our communities who are affected by human trafficking. And whereas as of December 31st, 2020, 11,500 cases were reported nationally to the National Human Trafficking Resource Center, with a majority of cases reported in California. And whereas Love Never Fails and Ruby's Place, two very appreciated Hayward service organizations, are committed to serving survivors of human trafficking and their children in order to restore them and the community. And whereas the city of Hayward is working to raise awareness so individuals will become more informed and able to identify ways their behavior contributes to a patriarchal culture that supports systemic abuse of vulnerable populations that include women and people of color. Now, therefore, I, Barbara Halliday, Mayor of the City of Hayward, do hereby proclaim the month of January 2022 as Human Trafficking Awareness Month in Hayward. And we celebrate the focus of residents to participate in efforts to raise awareness of and end all forms of human trafficking. Let us make it known that human trafficking has no place in our city. And here's a copy of the presentation, which will be sent to both of these organizations, Love Never Fails and Ruby's Place. And we are very happy to have representatives of both of those organizations here this evening with us. We have Vanessa Russell, and who is the founding executive director of Love Never Fails, and Nicole Daniels, who is the director of programs at Ruby's Place. And I also understand that Don Kirkland from Ruby's Place is also attending. So would either of you like to say anything, Vanessa or Nicole, or both of you? Vanessa?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you, Mayor Halliday and City Council members, family, friends, and colleagues. As was mentioned, I'm Vanessa Russell, the founding executive director of Love Never Fails, which is a nonprofit that serves survivors of human trafficking in Hayward with housing, workforce development services, and prevention education. And it's with humility that I thank you for today's proclamation and the ability to speak on behalf of survivors here in the city of Hayward and throughout the Bay Area. Human trafficking is an insidious crime that preys on the vulnerability of people for the financial gain of another. And many people in our community are suffering at this time due to COVID and other economic and social challenges. And so grateful that we have the opportunity to stop human trafficking through prevention education and help those that are currently ensnared by investing time and resources in barrier removal, by providing long-term housing, sustainable workforce development, and mental health services, which are just a few of the things that are needed to truly make a difference for survivors in need and their children. And so we're just grateful to be part of this fabric of care, along with Alameda County Family Justice Center and nonprofits like Ruby's Place, and all of which stand in solidarity for survivors and partner with them so that they can live their best lives. So thank you so much for always being such a a wonderful advocate for the work that we're doing. Mayor Halliday and the rest of Elisa and Francisco, all of the council members, you guys have always been so supportive, and we just can't thank you enough. And I'll pass it over to Nicole.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole Daniels. I'm the new Director of Programs for Ruby's Place. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Mayor Holliday, for honoring us with the proclamation. I think Vanessa spoke very much into human sex trafficking and labor trafficking. We at Ruby's Place are celebrating our 50th year. We're expanding services to youth and transitional age youth, folks who have been exploited, as well as labor trafficking. We're really honored to receive this proclamation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I mean, thank you both of you for and all of the people who work with you for the work that you're doing. Mr. Kirkland, did you want to say anything?
No, Nicole summed it up pretty well. Thank you again.
Well, I know we all want to thank all of you for the work that you do in our community and for bringing this proclamation to our attention every year. And so that we can let it be known that this work is going on in the city of Hayward, and just to let people know that should you see something or, know of anyone who is experiencing this, there are resources available. And, I know that our staff, our police department can connect you too. So anyway, thank you all for what you're doing. And we hope that, we hope that your services might someday no longer be needed. Actually, I'm sure you hope that too, but as long as they are, and they certainly are right now, we really do appreciate what you're all doing to help in this area in our city. Thank you. And so with that, we're now going to move on to public comments this evening. This is your opportunity to comment on any items that are not otherwise on our agenda. I'll open public comments, and I see that we do have one hand raised among attendees. Are we ready to bring them on, Madam City Clerk? And that would be, looks like Jade.
Hi there, my name is Jade. I do have a public comment, but I want to confirm, is the ordinance around the residential objective, that was continued from February 1st? Is that on today's meeting? I feel like I'm having a hard time seeing it.
I'm sorry, what item exactly are you?
The residential objective standards was heard in a work session by council. And so it will be, it was 2 weeks ago, actually. Yeah. And so
okay.
The ordinance hasn't been heard by council yet, but will be coming back for approval and consideration in the future.
Okay, I'd still like to speak on it. And I was just confused on it because I know at the February 1st meeting, it was continued. I assumed that it was going to be discussed at today's meeting. I just wanted to make a general public comment on it since I happened to miss it, but I am looking forward for when it will be discussed in the future. If there is more multi-unit housing built in the city of Hayward, I'm going to make the assumption that it will most likely be smoke-free based on the developers and hopefully by city council. But with that being said, I do believe that with consideration to all of the other multi-unit housing properties in Hayward, that the city should consider smoke-free multi-unit housing protections, given the successful passage that unincorporated Alameda County just had, and that at a county level, these are now protections that are kind of being held to a standard. And so with that ordinance around the density and multi-unit housing, I just really wanted to emphasize the importance of making sure that anybody that's going to move into new property and have the opportunity to live in new buildings, that other folks that have already been living in Hayward in lower income neighborhoods should have that same equitable living standard as those living in any other new developed multi-unit housing in the city of Hayward. So thank you so much for your time. I know I asked multiple questions. Just to confirm, it will be further discussed in another meeting.
Yes, and I don't know that we, Madam City Manager, do we have that scheduled yet?
It's not scheduled. That was the work session on February 1st was just the very preliminary discussion of that. So it will be on the city's website. There's a whole page devoted to both the housing element and the residential objective standards. So individuals can track the schedule there.
Okay, perfect. I know I shared my information on that, but have not heard anything back from anybody that is organizing around that. So I look forward to getting a response from there.
Okay, we'll
make sure we have your information.
Yeah, someone will follow up with you. The city clerk has your information, I assume, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Suzanne.
Hi, Mayor and City Council members. I just wanted to give you guys a reminder to please put on a very soon upcoming agenda to start focusing on the fireworks issue in Hayward. It is a huge, huge concern of the Hayward community, and I hope you guys know how big of a concern it is. And I just wanted to remind you to please put that in your focus. That's it. Thank you.
Yes.
I do have an update on that. We are bringing the social nuisance ordinance amendments related to fireworks. That will come back on March 22nd for consideration.
Okay. We will look forward to that. And thank you for the comment, Suzanne.
Thank you.
Okay. And then the next one is a number ending in 601.
Greetings, council members. This is Velda Go, and I did send a revised public comment. I'm sure you all have it by now. I just wanted to say thank you. I see there are multiple committees now dealing with Russell City, and I do not see when it will be coming up again on the agenda, but am really hoping that with the different versions of what the descendants and residents are looking forward to seeing some action on it, at least in the descendants that we have so far identified, that the Q25 Russell City restitution project would receive a allocation of a budget that we've given our recommendations on in the 2023 approved budget. And so I guess I'm asking that question, is Russell City going to be on the City Council agenda again? And I know the budget is going to be approved in June, but I'm not sure when the deadline date will be for that recommendation.
Okay. Is that it? Thank you.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm asking?
Well, yeah, yes. I don't know that we can answer those questions right now, but you will be, I think you're on a list of people to be notified about any further discussions we'll have. And the budget process, I think, I don't know whether those dates are on, but in May, we will be taking up the budget in a few different meetings. So keep, the good thing to do would be to keep reviewing city council agendas as they come forward. But May, and Madam City Manager?
I was just going to say we have Ms. Go's contact information, and we'll make sure that she and the other members of the Russell City Committee are notified if the item is being discussed, and we'll let everyone know when the budget hearings are.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised right now, although let's see, I do see from Council Member Wahab.
Thank you. I just also, I think I may have said this in our retreat, but I don't remember at this point. To our city manager, I know we have a multi-apartment, I guess, multi-housing unit ordinance regarding tobacco, and I did suggest if we can add cannabis to it, right? Cannabis smoke-free. Do you have any comments on that, or are we able to kind of make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be something. I think it came up during the strategic roadmap session, but it would have to be an amendment to the ordinance. And so I can't remember how the prioritization fell out for that item, but when we come back to the council for adoption of the updated roadmap, that would be the time to bring it up again. And just if it isn't prioritized, to make the pitch to your colleagues to have staff work on that sooner.
Okay. I think that should kind of be part of our ordinance currently. And then as far as the Russell City, I know that this is a longer conversation than just this budget cycle, right? Because we're pretty much full speed on our budget and should have something to review in the next maybe month or two. So could you just, because I know that they're going to potentially ask, can you just give like a high level timeline, even if it's even brought up, or right now it's just literally a seed staged idea, right?
Yeah. So right now, the plan and what we'll be most likely requesting funding for is funds to help engage a variety of consultants to help us work with and identify descendants of Russell City, to engage in a conversation with those descendants, and to put together a plan, which then would, so my suspicion is the full plan will not be funded for fiscal year 23, but it will be, we're starting those conversations now, and then that plan will continue to evolve, and hopefully we'll have a fully fleshed out plan over the next year that would then get funded in the following year's budget. But there will be funds set aside to help with that process, whether it's through hiring a consultant, whether it's through funds to help identify descendants of Russell City. And then we've sort of bifurcated. The art piece for the Heritage Plaza in front of the library had been underway. And so at the last meeting with the descendants, there was a discussion to sort of move forward with the art piece because it's well underway, it's funded. Let's go ahead and get that done, and then continue the conversation around what else can the city be working with. And there's a lot of partners we need to engage in this, obviously understanding the county's role and various other partners.
Bringing our partners, yeah. Exactly. And then, I hear, and we always get emails about this, the fireworks. I will say that, the sooner we can kind of try to hopefully tackle that, the better, especially hopefully before any of the big celebrations start to happen as spring comes along and the weather gets nicer. So, that's not lost on us. I just wanted to highlight that and echo some of the public comments about that. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And seeing no other hands raised from either attendees or panelists, I'm going to close public comments right now this evening, and we will go on to comments from our city manager, or continuing comments from our city manager.
Thank you. Just a few announcements this evening. I wanted to highlight that the City of Hayward, in partnership with the Hayward Arts Council, the Hayward Unified School District, Alameda County Supervisor Richard Valle's office, and the Hayward Public Library is sponsoring the search for Hayward's first Youth Poet Laureate. Hayward teens aged 13 through 19 are invited to submit 3 to 5 of their original poems to be considered for this very important 2-year appointment. The position comes with a $1,000 prize, huge incentive, so please note $1,000. Runners-up will also receive cash prizes, and the deadline to apply is 2 days from now, February 17th. More details can be found at the Arts Council website, which is haywardartscouncil.org. And then some other good news. The Hayward Executive Airport is scheduled to receive a FAA infrastructure grant. On November 15th, 2021, the president signed HR 3684, commonly known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. $15 billion is available in this year over 5 years for airport infrastructure grants. The Federal Aviation Administration has provided written confirmation that the Hayward Executive Airport will be receiving a grant in the amount of $763,000 for fiscal year 2022. And we will be able to fund various types of capital projects with that grant funding subject to FAA approval. And then lastly, I'm sure as the community has been tracking and well aware, the state's masking requirements, along with Alameda County's for indoor masking, will be changing as of tomorrow, I believe, at midnight. And for the City of Hayward facilities, just so that we can be consistent with some other policy implementation that we are working through, we will continue to require the wearing of masks by all visitors to city facilities through the end of February. And I just wanted to make that announcement so that folks know that we will still be requiring masks until at least February 28th in all city facilities. And thank you. That's my announcements for the evening.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will move on to our action items this evening. Our consent calendar consists of items 1 through 3. Is there anyone who would like to pull any of these items off, including from the members of the public? I'm not seeing any hands going up, so I will entertain a motion for items 1 through 3.
So moved, Mayor Marquez.
Okay. Moved by Councilmember Marquez, seconded by Councilmember Salinas.
Yeah.
No. Okay. On the motion, Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Aye.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Salinas.
Yes.
Councilmember Wahab.
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño.
Aye.
Mayor Halliday.
Yes. And the motion carries with 7 aye votes. Moving right along, we will now move to item number 4, which is a work session on our public safety projects, an update. So we're going to be receiving and discussing an update on the public safety policy innovation workshop projects that we approved a while ago. So I think we will start with City Manager McAdoo on this one. Correct.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And we have a number of team members here who are going to participate in the conversation and presentation this evening. And we look forward to hearing the Council's feedback. As the Council is well aware, following the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020, the city embarked on an extensive community outreach process that then resulted in a series of what we called our policy innovation workshops, which led to the generation of a number of community and staff-based ideas for basically enhancing police services, improving our mental health response, and looking at a variety of other ways to make our community feel safer, both psychologically, physically, emotionally, sort of all of the elements of safety. And so this evening, we have a great team who's been working on all these projects after the council approved funding for them on May 18th, 2021 as part of this year's budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Laurel James, a management analyst in the city manager's office. She will kick us off and we'll be joined by a number of the other project managers. So Laurel, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, City Manager McAdoo, and good evening, Mayor and Council. We have a slide deck to share with you this evening, and I'm happy to kick off our update on the Public Safety Policy Innovation Workshop pilot projects. And this is a 6-month implementation update that Council requested after directing staff to begin implementation of 9 priority pilot projects in May of 2021. So I believe City Manager McAdoo already went through much of the background of this work, and I do want to highlight that these projects do come from the results of our community conversations and public safety survey that began in fall 2020, in which 1,700 residents participated and responded to the survey or participated in a conversation. And they are the recommendations from the Public Safety Policy Innovation Workshop, which represented the work of 33 participants, including 13 community members, 9 HPD staff, 4 Hayward Fire Department staff, and 7 other city staff who are members of our racial equity team, who put in over 2,000 hours of work to develop these recommendations. With that, I'm going to hand it over to some of our project managers to give updates on their project's implementation, and then we'll wrap it up with some next steps and questions and comments. So I would like to hand it over to Shannalee Gallagher from the Fire Department to provide an update on the Communication Center Needs Assessment.
Thank you, Laurel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Shanna Lee Gallagher, and I'm the project manager for the Dispatch Needs Assessment and Strategic Plan project. Just as a review, this project was initiated to help identify specific needs in our communication center to support the pilot projects that emerged from the policy innovation workshops. The city did contract dispatch subject matter experts to conduct the comprehensive needs assessment that really allows us to develop actionable goals to make adjustments to existing processes, the physical layout of the communication center, staffing levels, and to really enhance technology and training that will directly support alternative responses to the behavioral health related calls. Next slide, please. So the implementation is going quite well. In August, the city published the RFP and contracted Federal Engineering Consulting Group in October. In November, staff began compiling data for the consultant's initial analysis, and in January, Federal Engineering conducted on-site visits and met with all of the internal stakeholders. From February through May, the consultants will really work to further develop the analysis and recommendations for their final report. We do expect a final report in the end of May, and we'll present to City Council shortly thereafter. Next slide, thank you. And of course, there are challenges along the way. Staff is experiencing a few challenges with the ability to really extract and aggregate relevant data to better understand the calls related to behavioral health, substance abuse, and homelessness. And we do also anticipate future challenges accessing additional resources to implement consultant recommendations and the strategic plan. And I'll stick around for questions in the end.
Thank you, Shanali. And I'd like to hand it over to Emily Young and Chief Contreras to provide updates on projects 2, 3, and 4.
Started, or do you want me to dive in?
You want me to start? I can start with project, and then we'll kind of do like we've been doing, Emily. The mobile mental health response team, as you see referred there, the challenge that staff met when we first started to implement this pilot program was to incorporate a lot of hopes and aspirations from the innovation work and the community work that was done and incorporate it into a new program that we have coined the HEART program, the Hayward Evaluation and Response Team. And that is an overall team of a few different disciplines that are working together to create an alternative response to mental health in our community. And one of those projects that the fire department is very much involved in is the Mobile Integrated Health Unit. And the reason we've kind of a change of words and nomenclature there is to better capture the whole person treatment of how we engage with folks that are experiencing behavioral health emergencies or behavioral health crises. Depending on the situation that they're in, and approaching and getting to the underlying problems of what people are experiencing and their reasons for calling 911, whether it's initiated through the police department or the fire department, with an overarching goal of the Mobile Integrated Health Unit being to provide preventative care as well as follow-up care for folks that have been in crisis. And hopefully, if we are successful, as we have been on a few occasions up until this point since the start of the program, we will be minimizing or reducing the overall number of unnecessary police contacts. And these are incidents where we're able to deal with them, where there is no threat of violence on the scene, or we have a police department is involved for scene safety and scene security. And we're attempting to provide alternative treatments to the traditional send them to the emergency room or send them to John George. Up until this point, we are not deploying them on active 911 calls, the Mobile Integrated Health Unit. And the reason for that is to test things small and address any failures that we identify along the way and pivot and fix them so that we don't repeat similar mistakes. And we've had some success on that with the program already. They are averaging about 20 hours a week of operation. and dealing with all different types of interactions within the community, from the unhoused population to frequent users of 911 services, both on the medical side or on the law enforcement side, as well as follow up to known cases of folks that are kind of circling or slipping through the cracks. And we're aware of them, but we need alternative solutions. One of the keys to this, as Shauna Lee mentioned, is the tie-in to over-the-phone triage, quite frankly, taking place over the course of time. And we hope that at the conjunction of this pilot program, about the end of the time of the recommendations to council for the dispatch needs assessment, that we'll be able to make some really innovative changes on how we dispatch calls and how we do call handling overall, and create a different route and different path. The one barrier that we still have is those alternative destinations. It's great to have programs with a different plan and a different direction moving forward, but we don't have the ability to do things different, and there isn't alternative destinations to the emergency room or the 72-hour hold, then we're just repeating the same cycle. One of the most promising pieces of that is Assembly Bill 1544, which was passed by both the Senate and the Assembly unanimously and is awaiting regulatory rewrite by the regulator and the state. And that will allow for alternative transportation to both level 2 receiving facilities, sobering centers, drug treatment centers, as well as prompt care, things like the Firehouse Clinic. All that opens up as soon as AB 1544 is signed into law, and we're really optimistic that that's going to be happening soon. I'm a little surprised it hasn't happened yet. I was hoping for November when it was originally promised. We've kind of slow walked some things, hoping for that, because we know what we're doing here in the early stages is very much data collection until we have that alternative piece where we can get them to the appropriate receiving facility, whatever that may be, whether, like I mentioned, whether that's a counseling center or a sobering center, or in some cases, I mean, we're finding other needs that are going to be part of our budget requests that maybe weren't anticipated, maybe a little, things like showers and opportunities to make sure that we have some human decency elements that we're bringing to the program. And I'm really thankful of both Jackie Batista in Hayward's Youth and Family Services Bureau and Frank Crespo from the fire department, who are working together on this unit, who eventually will probably be in some form or another managing this program. But right now they are rolling their sleeves up and doing the work in the community so that we can make sure that this program is really unique to the needs of our community, that we're capturing the hopes and dreams of all of the innovation work that was done by the community and by the different work groups. And I feel like we're well on our way. I'm happy to report out or answer any questions, but want to turn it over to Emily to speak about the other change in nomenclature that Emily's going to talk about with the Met.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah, so the Chief talked about the Mobile Integrated Health Unit half of the project, but we really are envisioning it as an integrated whole, which includes a second team, which is the Mobile Evaluation Team, or MET for short. And both the Mobile Integrated Health Unit and the Mobile Evaluation Team are best practices that we have borrowed from other jurisdictions that have done things well. And we think we're the first to combine them in exactly this way. And we like it because it gives us a whole range of options so that we're getting the right team or resource to the right call for service. And the Chief touched on looking at people as whole people and really understanding their medical, mental health, substance use, housing needs. They're all interrelated. You can't just deal with one without all of them together. And so we're really trying to build out a system of supports that connects people to what they actually need. The behavioral health coordinator piece of that is a component, and that's really a capacity building, infrastructure building role, because I think there are some services and resources that exist that we're underutilizing. And so some of the low hanging fruit, if you will, is being able to connect people to resources that already exist and getting a really good sense of where are the gaps. And then we can have the conversation about how do we fill them. So we know that there's this first responder piece, and that's what the MET team and the MEHU are approaching. There's also a resource utilization piece. The behavioral health coordinator is helping build out the infrastructure for that system. And all together, we're hoping that this comes together as a cohesive whole. And it's a partnership because we can't do it all by ourselves. And so we're working with the county. They're providing the clinician for the mobile evaluation team. We're working with community-based organizations who work in our area. And as the chief mentioned, the city is also adding our share of staff time and energy to the project with some great success so far. Our district command police officers are the officers assigned to the MET team, and they all are CIT trained, and they are the crisis negotiators for the department. So they're the folks with the most specialized training in de-escalation and mental health issues. And so they're the right people to co-respond with that clinician from the county. And I actually, in the next slide, I think our timeline is on the next slide, but that team has been up and running since June, because some of these conversations had predated or kind of were happening simultaneously with the policy innovation workshops. We were able to get that team up and running really quickly. And so since June, we've had this co-responder team responding to calls for service, and it's been going really well. They've helped a lot with some of the issues that come up at the schools, and they're able to help with some of the 5150 or 5585, which is the terminology for assessment of danger to self or others, when there's students on the campus, and really provide some clinical support in those situations. And we've also been able to help in some more extreme situations when there are weapons involved and people are dealing with kind of simultaneously weapons and mental health issues, and their family members are at a loss of what to do, and patrol is very limited in what they're able to do. The MET team has come in handy in some of those situations as well. And so it's been really gratifying to see such quick successes from just putting existing resources together in a smart way. And we're really excited about the potential and direction that we can take these programs. So June, we've got the MET team off the ground. We've moved Jackie Bautista into the behavioral health coordinator position. She's one of the counselors from YFSB. She's been with the city for 16 years and is passionate about this. So I said, I need you for this project. So she was gracious enough to let me borrow her and reassign her to this for the duration of the pilot, and has been just a superstar. We've been doing a ton of community outreach. We participated in all the City Hall TU events to just really get the word out, but more importantly, to listen to other people and to the community and what they're seeing and what they're needing. And community engagement has been a big piece of this from the beginning. We've got the mobile integrated health unit rolling now, and we just look forward to continuing to figure out how to expand and improve through the pilot. Next slide. Staffing resources remain a challenge. It's hard to find quality clinicians who want to work these challenging shifts, and so we're working on it. The chief touched on 1544, which is the transport laws, and we're having data challenges that Shanley talked about, and we can go into depth and answer questions that anyone has about those at the question and answer part. And I think that's all I've got for you for now. Throw it over to Deputy Chief Matthews.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? All right, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here to talk about project number 6, which is our pilot program for the community service officers. If you will recall from prior meetings, as part of the project background, this is a solution that was developed as an alternative to having armed police officers respond to certain low-level non-violent calls for service. And it's a solution that's designed to free up our officers to be able to handle priority calls for service and deal with some of the major crime issues that we have in our community. So far, all of the feedback that we've gotten from this pilot program has been very, very positive. Starting with the CSOs, they love it. They love the opportunity to learn new things and be in the field and engage with our officers. And one of the things that we found is that they are able to spend more time on some of these calls for service and interacting with community members than our officers would when they have to run from call to call to call. Just as an anecdotal story, one of the things that we experienced with a call for service, our CSOs responded out, investigated a stolen vehicle, were able to spend time on that call, and within minutes, they were able to locate the vehicle and get it back to the owner. As kind of a success story. The officers have been fully supportive of this pilot project. One of the things that it's done is it's created kind of a departmental team building opportunity. A lot of the officers are offering their experience and their expertise in helping our CSOs learn how to investigate these crimes. And again, they're freeing our officers up to be able to handle priority calls for service. And we also reached out to a handful of community members who were victims of property crimes and spoke to them about their experience in dealing with our CSOs, and received nothing but positive feedback from them as well. They felt the interactions went well, the response was quick, and that the CSOs were thorough, professional, and had no issues with them.
Captain Matthews, you're fading out, at least on my, yeah. I don't know what happened. We were hearing you fine, and then your volume dropped.
Okay, how about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I have a new computer. I'm trying to figure this thing out.
Okay, keep it where it is, because that's good. We can hear you.
Next slide, please. So as far as the timeline is concerned, we started working on this in July. We did a lot of research and looking at what other agencies were doing with similar programs. We met internally with some of our bargaining groups and staff impacted to kind of finalize roles and responsibilities, to understand workflow, and to identify training needs. Some of our CSOs have worked in the field doing things like abandoned vehicle abatement, but a lot of them have not. And so there was a training component that needed to happen to make this pilot program work. We started actually putting CSOs in the field in November. And so we have about 2 months and some change of experience in having these folks out there and helping out our patrol folks. The program, we are looking to expand. Right now, we're doing it on a volunteer basis. And we, unfortunately, each one of our CSOs has a primary job within the police department. Most of them work in the jail. And so in order to get this pilot program off the ground, we had to do it with overtime. And we're looking to expand the program hours and availability and even capacity in the future if we continue to see success with this program. Next slide, please. Some of our challenges, obviously staffing. Again, they each have a primary job responsibility. We have minimum staffing levels in the jail that would need to be met. And so this is done on a volunteer overtime basis. If we explore expansion of the program and expansion of some of the calls for service that these folks can respond to, that may entail actually having a conversation about changing classifications and things like that. So there may be more work to be done on this. And then one of the things that we dealt with, at least in the month of December and the beginning of January, was the impacts of COVID on staff and folks having to quarantine. Next slide. And I'll pass it off to whoever's presenting next.
Hey, Brian, it's me. Thank you so much.
And thank you. I just want to apologize for misreferring to you as Captain Matthews, which you used to be, instead of Deputy Chief Matthews, but thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. So I'll give a very brief update. I think some of the council members have heard about this project. So we launched this project around September. We advertised the project at 13 City Hall to You events in the fall. And then, you can go back. And then we accepted applications for delegates during that time. We had, quite a bit of interest in delegates. We currently have about 50 delegates attending regular meetings, and they are currently conducting community outreach and creating project proposals. We also launched an online map for community members to submit project ideas. We have over 200 ideas submitted on that map if you haven't checked it out. And then we worked with Chabot college students in the fall. They had ideas for proposals, and we had an open house where we actually got to meet in person. We haven't had many opportunities yet to meet in person, but the delegates came and we met in a large gymnasium, so it was COVID safe, and the students shared their proposals. So we are releasing the voter guide. We're currently finishing the proposals. We'll release the voter guide and do the get out the vote in April with community voting in May. You can go to the next slide. Our challenge, just like every other project, has been with the COVID-19, especially the recent surge. We are hoping to do voting in March. One of the main strategies here is to do voting, hopefully at some of the school sites. And since we had to close down some school sites for COVID, and A lot of public facilities right now have been closed. So we postponed the voting to be in May, and hopefully by that time we'll all be able to be in person a little bit more. So that's the main one. And then the other one, of course, I think we're all experiencing Zoom fatigue. It's just hard to keep getting on those Zoom meetings and keeping motivated when we can't see each other in person. But hopefully that will get better this spring. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. And then I'll provide the remaining project updates to council. As a reminder, project number 5, which was expanding shelter options and outreach, is being considered in the context of the Lighthouse Hayward strategic plan to reduce homelessness rather than duplicating efforts. Project number 9, which is an HPD training curriculum working group, which would partner members of the community on a working group with some of the HPD training staff to discuss the curriculum and how to make it appropriate and sensitive to the needs of our community, has been scheduled for and will commence this quarter in fiscal year 22 due to staffing limitations. And project number 17, which council brought into the 9 recommended projects, a community complaint liaison, has also been scheduled for and will commence in this quarter due to staffing limitations. So with that, the next steps are to continue implementation of pilot projects and collecting data on project cost and performance. So we have a robust data set to use for analysis and for presenting recommendations to council and to share with the community. To develop budget and resource requests to support continuing pilots for fiscal year 2023 and continue exploring grant funding opportunities, to launch the project scheduled for the second half of fiscal year 2022, and to continue reporting out to council on pilot performance and projects recommended for midterm implementation and or further research. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to you for questions and public comment.
So that's it for the presentation? Okay, sorry. And you can stop sharing your screen. Yeah, thanks. This is a work session item, so I'm going to open it up first for public comments. And I see we have one hand raised and that 2 hands raised now. Cynthia Nunes.
Hi, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. My name's Cynthia Nunes. I'm a member of Hey Coco, also the cousin of Augie Gonzalez, who was killed by Hayward PD in 2018. I think before I get into commenting on the pilot program updates, I do have a suggestion that y'all also include the names of the people that were killed by police here in Hayward as well in this process, because these projects are also because of those people, because of people like my cousin and Stony Ramirez and the many people who were killed by Hayward police here in our own backyards as well. But to get into the process of the pilots, I feel a little taken aback because we've been having meetings with your staff in regards to like MET and HEART implementation. And, you know, I've been reading through the process of MET and the description and policies, and honestly, it's very vague. There's a lot of typos in it. It's very unprofessional and super concerning. And it's even more concerning that y'all are operating this process already with these issues. I think like the public needs to hear more about HEART and its progress and what's happening, because to be completely transparent, I didn't even know HEART was already in process. Last time we were told that like there were still staffing issues and funding issues, and that only MET had been implemented and that HEART wasn't ready to be implemented yet, which is an issue in itself already. And now the fact that y'all are combining the two when the community was been crying to you to have no cops responding to behavioral health needs. And then now like the tables are turning and you're partnering with the police department again, which seems to me that y'all aren't listening. So this is a huge issue. I think like y'all need to reevaluate what's happening. I don't know what the deal is, if this has just been like a con that y'all have been planning. But honestly, I feel really hurt that we've been having these meetings. Y'all acted like you cared. You said you'd have this process, but now you have a process that literally includes cops in the middle of that process. Like you start without them, then you bring them in. Like it doesn't make any sense. People don't respond well to cops. People with trauma, people in low income and directly impacted communities do not want to sit in a room with their oppressor and with their abuser. And I don't know how many times I have to tell y'all that until it gets in your head and you do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is TJ.
Hi, I'm TJ from Hayward Concerned Citizens. I just wanted to bring up a concern about the Public Safety Project Implementation Dashboard website. It needs to be updated compared to what you just presented tonight. Project One, for example, the dispatch needs assessment, it has a link that's not accessible to the public. And for the HEART program and the community services officers for property crimes, it'd be nice to see the actual data, the numbers. Several of these programs look like they got off the ground in June 2021, so I'd expect some hard data as to the successes and the challenges moving forward. I know the police still keep data on mental health calls on their weekly blotter, so I'm wondering if those are separate from what the HEART program is handling. I also know Councilmember Wahab had suggested early on to continue consulting with stakeholders as things go along, and I haven't heard that having happened. So I look forward to having more information in the near future. And finally, I hope Council was listening to Deputy Chief Matthews. More police staff needed. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Jesse Gunn.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to agree with someone from the Hayward Concerned people. My name is Jesse Gunn. I'm a teacher here in Hayward, a longtime Hayward resident, born and raised here, and I'm also a member of Hayward Community Coalition. And I wanted to say that, yes, we need data. Specifically, I'd like to know what ratio, I'm going to talk about ratios here, like I'm at school, but what ratio of calls being sent for mental health issues have an armed officer and which ones don't? And so I'd like, that seems like a pretty simple thing we could get, because I'd like to know that this HEART program is not being, I don't know the right word. I want to say swallowed up by police calls as we've been used to them in the past. So I want to see that this is something different and that something's going on here that is actually meaningful and is going to better lives. Because I have time, I will go into something more personal. My father attempted suicide twice. The health consequences from this persisted for 2 years afterwards, in which case he ultimately passed away. And he had a lot of difficulties, and there were many times where he needed help, did not have anybody to call. If we would have called the police, he would have been killed. And so people need somebody to call, and they need to know that the person that they call is safe and is not going to allow somebody to commit suicide by cop. And so this is important to me. It's something that I am passionate about, and I want to see that it's different. I want to see that I can be proud of what Hayward is doing. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't see any other public comments at the moment. So with seeing no hands going up, I'm going to close public comments on this item and go to council. And we'll go first to Councilmember Zermeño.
Mayor, thank you. Are we just doing questions and comments later?
Questions? No, questions and comments together. This is a work session item.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have 3 quick questions, actually. I probably know the answer, but I'm going to ask them anyway. Deputy Chief Matthews, if a CSO is responding to a community call and a weapon is produced, what is protocol?
Are trained to, one of the conversations that we had in implementing this pilot program was to make sure that that our staff is safe. right? They do not carry the same equipment that a police officer carries, and so they shouldn't be responding to certain calls at all. And what we've advised them is if it seems unsafe, or if something makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck, hold off and call an officer to respond with you. So far, we haven't run into that particular issue. One of the things that we're careful about, and one of the conversations that we had with our comm center staff was making sure that when we are responding to these calls with CSOs, the offender is not on scene. It's not something that's in progress. These are cold calls for service, and they're primarily contacting crime victims.
Right. And the CSO carries no firearms, and they do drive a patrol car, correct?
They do not drive a patrol car. They actually drive a pickup truck. It's a CSO specific vehicle that we had in the fleet already.
Okay.
But they do not carry firearms, no.
Okay. All right. Let's see. And I have a question, I guess, for staff. So what happened to Project 7? Can you remind me what happened to it?
Yes, Councilmember Zermano, Council opted not to implement Project 7 in favor of Project 17.
Got it. Okay, I forgot about that. Okay, very good. I have no more questions, just some comments. And as per the calls, I do agree that the data would certainly be something that would be good for us. So start working on that just to ensure that we have complete transparency on this. And it's always good to have folks know that certain calls, there are police officers, and certain calls, there are no police officers. So that's important. And I'm glad that a couple of public commenters made that point. So thank you for that. I do like the program. I like the progress. I like the partnerships. The community input that was gathered is tremendous as far as I'm concerned. Very impressive work by all of our staff. I love HEART, how you came up with that particular thing. And the overall scope of the projects is tremendous. So I think this is good for our city and for our residents in general. Are we making sure that these projects are being that we're outreaching to all of our communities, that we're educating about their existence? What have we done in that research, in that respect?
That's great.
Go ahead, Laurel, if you want to respond, or I'm happy to.
Whichever you prefer. I was going to say that all of the projects have soft launched. They're not at full capacity. And so the goal is to do public outreach and to share how the projects work and do more publicity around them when they're available on a more consistent and full-time basis. And City Manager McAdoo, sorry, I want to let you finish. I
was just going to say, and I think it also speaks to the concern that you've heard from staff about just being able to collect data. We want to fix the data collection mechanisms while we're still in small scale startup mode, so that then we actually can provide, absolutely one of the key points of this is to be able to provide data to the council, to the community, of how we're changing responses. And we've, as you've heard from a number of the staff members, had some challenges with that. So we don't really want to do like a full scale, hey, these are all up and operating, until we're able to clean up those data issues and make sure we've got that in place going forward.
Okay, which is in conjunction with the fact that we are short on personnel and, of course, perhaps on funding too. So I imagine that the full launch will be 2 or 3, 1 or 2 months, maybe? Is that what we're thinking about?
Well, we've already, the website is live, as you've heard. The community is, if you are watching, we've done some stack newsletter articles about the projects. but my guess is it'll probably be a few more months. One of the key elements is the dispatch center improvements. And so we've got to wait until those recommendations come forward. So it's likely going to be that we'll see towards the end of this fiscal year, we'll likely have some budget recommendations that'll go for next year that will help us do a full-scale launch.
All right. And the fact that this program has the participation of our deputy police chief, our fire chief, our staff is tremendous. So thank you very much to all.
Thank you. Councilmember Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank staff for their hard work. I know it hasn't been easy to get these pilot projects up and running, but I do appreciate everyone's commitment and intent to improve basically relationships with anyone that is in our city, anyone that interacts with our public safety. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind. And just want to speak briefly on some of the comments I heard from Ms. Nunes. I know she's made it in the past as well. And I know I've raised this. I think we need to collectively acknowledge the reason why we are here. Yes, George Floyd had a huge impact, but we also have our own issues here in the city. There was back-to-back shootings back in May of 2020. So I just want us to be mindful and considerate of that. And no matter what the circumstances are, who's right, who's wrong, people were hurt, families were damaged, and we lost people in our community. So just hope that we could continue to be mindful of that and make sure that we acknowledge that when we continue to have these tough discussions. In regard to the mental health component and the launching of that project, can staff please just summarize at what point is an armed officer involved? Is it situational? And just kind of re-explain that to all of us, please.
If it works, council member, I don't mind jumping in there because I'm hearing where this conversation's kind of going and where that question originates. And, I've been real clear is we've been tasked with this new priority and meshed it with our existing on the ground understanding of the needs in the community and the response patterns and call types. And to answer that question it really is, it sounds cliche, but it is so dependent on the individual call type and the information collected on the 911 call. I've been clear, including in my meetings with Hey Coco, when I met with them a couple of months ago, we had a good conversation about some of this and asked at that time for that space to us to start operating in this nonviolent mental health space and the preventative space. To give us that space to have law enforcement there for our scene safety and for the community scene safety. And when we have the opportunity to clear them, and the goal is to start to show that there are specific call types that we can safely send appropriate resources to without an armed law enforcement officer, but to not do so until we are relatively assured. We have a pretty sophisticated data collection system in the city of Hayward. I understand the community's concern and desire to have it very clean data. And for instance, a mental health patient could come through in any form, from a person down in the street to an abdomen. It is very difficult to categorize them as a mental health patient when they have underlying conditions. So sometimes they get boxed up. So we have this in this slow rollout soft launch, a change in our prioritization and our nomenclature and our categorization of calls so that we can start to put patients in the appropriate, for lack of a better term, the appropriate call type bucket and be sending the appropriate resource to the appropriate call. So an example to your question from our perspective is if there is a weapon, if there is any threat to someone's safety, we're going to expect, much like we do already on all emergency medical calls where there's a potential for violence, is we have them there for scene safety, law enforcement. And when we no longer need them for scene safety, they're cleared and they move on to something that they are needed for. I think it's important for us to help and answer that because we need, if we're going to make change as a community, if we're going to change this dynamic and this response, we need that space to make the change and not produce the data, but use the data to guide our decisions. And that's why we started it small, so that we're already too busy, 20 hours a week, than to even start tapping into new calls, just on follow-ups and existing. So we know the needs there, but before we scale and we grow any programs, we want to make sure that we're bringing the right resources to the right folks at the right time, and that it's appropriate, and that we are supporting law enforcement and their efforts as well to reduce unnecessary contacts. And that's been our commitment since the initial foray into this conversation. And that's my commitment now, is that we will continue to find those opportunities to change that dynamic, so that some of the things that we heard from the community earlier, it's understood that we're hearing it. We're hearing every bit. There's nothing no blind eye being turned to any of this. I think it's we're very, very sensitive to these issues, and are aggressively addressing them, including through the regulatory process, which can be painstaking, to make sure that we're all doing things within the confines of the existing laws. It's not as simple as deciding we're not handling this patient in this manner anymore. If it's not in compliance with state law and the health and safety code, then we're running afoul, and we're not going to have a successful long-term program. And that's the ultimate goal. So sorry to jump in there on kind of what's not really a fire department question, more of a law enforcement question, but I do feel it's important that we remind everyone that we need them there if we're going to be engaged in this. And over the course of time, we will learn and we will get better. And we already know really good on medical calls when we can say, we're good, code 4, we got it. And we need to learn and get better so that we don't put the public or our personnel in harm's way, but ultimately so that we have a more successful program. Sorry for the long diatribe.
No, I appreciate that. So if you could just answer this a little bit more briefly, please. If there is a call for service and someone is having a mental health episode and they do not present with the weapon, who's the first person to speak to them? I just want to have like a visual understanding of, does it just depend on who arrives first, or just help me understand who's the first point of contact? It
really depends on how the call came in. Oftentimes, the fire department is faced with those patients. We find someone who's suicidal and they've taken meds, and they're no threat to themselves more than what they've already done, no threat to the public. The route for them, we deal with thousands of those a year where we never even contact PD. They are a medical patient, and we need to have that same ability on some of the low-level mental health stuff so that we can route them. Right now, there is no alternative to John George and an emergency room under state law. Once 911 is initiated, they shall be seen at emergency room or a level 1 mental health facility. And so our hands are somewhat tied in this early rollout, but the most simple way of answering that, council member, is however the call comes in. So if it comes in as abdominal pain and we get there, and the reason the abdominal pain is because someone has a self-inflicted wound to their abdomen, now we are notifying law enforcement because we have an injury. It's something that has taken place. But if there's just a threat and there's no threat to anyone, we deal with those things all the time without escalating a response. And that's what we hope to be able to continue to have the flexibility to do and prove with the data over the course of time that we've had X number of reduction in unnecessary contacts.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I have a couple questions for Mary. I don't know if she could jump back on, but in regard to the people's budget, are we sending actual ballots? Are we going to do a combination of balloting, voting online? Just trying to understand. And then is it per household? I'm assuming it's not registered voter, right? This is just community.
No, so it's any resident age 10 and up. So it actually is for youth as well. And so that's why reasons we want to have these ballot boxes at the middle and high schools to encourage kind of that civic participation. We will be allowing online voting and in-person voting, and then each person will need to, it's a bit of an honor system, will need to sign an affidavit basically saying, yes, I live in Hayward and I've only voted once. So that's yeah.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions for now. Thank you, Meryl. I give my time to the rest of the council. I'm sure they have a lot to say as well, but thank you.
Thanks. Okay, and we'll go to Councilmember Salinas next.
Thank you. As I was listening to the report, I was real pleased to see that I think staff is listening to the feedback coming out of neighborhoods, and looking and really looking at the data, our communities, the community survey data. They're certainly listening to callers, and I'll just give this little example. I really appreciated what Chief Contreras just articulately designated as sort of this nonviolent mental health space. And the fact that he was able to articulate that in this space, we do need flexibility. That flexibility enables us to, when people call in for an emergency, and it's a mental health episode or a mental health situation, that, both fire, police, and, our counselors, they can enter this space and be able to, respond appropriately. Are there violent mental health spaces? Sure. But conversely, I think we need to be very clear as to the spaces that we're being called upon, to enter. And so I think that was a nice way of explaining that. As Councilmember Marquez was talking, I couldn't help but to think, the type of calls. I wanted to I know the type of call is important, and how our, fire and police respond to those calls are based on the caller. And I was just curious how much, and I don't know if Deputy Chief Matthews can answer this or somebody else, but how much influence does the caller have when, or how much does the 911 operator, how much do they listen to the caller to make the call, to designate a call? You know what I'm saying? Like, they have to listen, they're getting the information from the caller. So how much of the caller do they translate to, when they dispatch a call? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
I can hopefully answer that question. They try to, our comm center operators try to gather as much information as they can from the caller or callers for every single call that they dispatch to both police and fire. Sometimes that's easier than others. Sometimes you have people who are in, have difficulty answering questions because they're in a very, very elevated state, right? They're seeing something that's creating, a shock to their system, and it's hard to get information from them. But they're trying to gather as much information. And one of the key components to making a determination about whether or not the MET team or a police officer becomes involved is whether or not there's a weapon present, whether or not somebody is exhibiting pre-assault indicators. Most of the calls that our officers respond to are conduct-based. Some of them on the front end, you can tell that there may be a mental health component to it. Others, you can't, and they have to make that assessment when they arrive on scene and start processing information. So again, to the fire chief's point, it really is call specific and dependent upon, the individual who's calling 911.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That was the what I was thinking about after the last set of questions came up. So I just, but I do have a few things I wanted to ask. One, all the projects that were presented, I think they were good. I think they're on track. Of course, we'll continue to engage community partners and stakeholders, and I'm confident that's going to happen, and I'm confident it's been happening. I mean, so there's that. The question I have is as we work through our challenges, is clearly the number one challenge seems to be staffing. Is how are we looking at sustainability strategies and plans? I mean, how are we going to be funding this and financing this? Like, staffing is expensive, particularly when we're talking about protection services. So how is that factoring in all this?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you heard, finding well-qualified behavioral health clinicians has been the biggest challenge. And I think that is what we're seeing as a challenge in most of the agencies in the county and in the Bay Area, frankly. So we are continuing, I think the staff teams have been continuing to have conversations. The goal of the next 6 months before we kick off this next fiscal year is to really try to get a sense of which of these programs are very sustainable and how might we continue to fund them, at least, for the next few years. And so, hopefully we'll be able to come up with some longer term strategies on some things, but those are going to be constant discussion items for our team, at least through the next few months, so that we have some firmer recommendations to council as part of the budget process.
Yeah, and I'm sure those decisions will be determined based on our data, right? And so I guess have we identified very specific sets of data, or what kind of data we're looking for right now?
The team it's probably a lot more in the weeds than we need to get, but yes, the team has identified what those look like. And as I mentioned, it's a combination of things. It's changing the way field responders are reporting data. It's changing the way 911 calls are characterized and recorded and processed. It's adding capacity in our dispatch center to do a medical emergency dispatch. So there's a lot of different elements of it. But yes, I'll just say yes, the team is working through all of those issues.
Just two last things, and because I know there's a lot more questions ahead, but there have been I have been given some feedback on call it the soft launch on some response calls. And the responses have been positive. I think people have genuinely appreciated to see a team of folk out there, professionals responding to some of the mental health, or I should say, nonviolent mental health spaces or calls. And I think so. That's good. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. The other thing I wanted to just bring up is whoever came up with HEART. Oh my God, that is a great acronym. So whoever did that, everybody, that guy deserves an applaud because it's just a great way to frame the work that this unit is doing. So anyways, I had a bunch of other questions, but I know there's time is limited, so I'll let it go. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, not that, but I'm sure you can follow up with staff if you really have other questions. But so next we have Councilmember Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. And I just had a couple of questions before my comments. And I understand that HEART was announced at City Hall to you. I remember seeing the stack and then on social media. What other avenues was it communicated that HEART was having a soft launch?
I'll take that one because I'll take personal responsibility for it not being broadly communicated, because we are not at a point to where we can deal with the inevitable demand for the services. And we are at a better point and a scalable point, and we have a clear understanding of what calls the MIHU will and won't respond to, then we will proudly be communicating broadly with the community. But we did not want the early success of the program to be stymied by being overwhelmed quickly by demand for resources or requests for information. So we hope to be changing that from a soft launch to a real launch, and clear communications in the relatively near future when we have, where we're surely that we're collecting the right data, the right information, we're responding to the right calls, then we will be able to scale and have more resources available, I believe.
Thank you for that. And how often was communication made with Hey Coco and Hayward Concerned Citizens after we announced that we were going to move forward with soft launches of these initiatives, or at least get started?
I think there were a couple. I know I was only involved in one communication with them, regrettably, at this point. If I had it to do over again, I would have had a conversation and just after the first of the year. Our angst to try and get out in the field is what prevented that. No excuse. We probably should have had a further conversation. So.
Thank you for accepting that. But I was also wondering, was this soft launch also mentioned during the academies? I know that there's some virtual academies that are also done. Was the soft launch discussed during those times as well?
Are you referring to the community academy that the police department puts on?
Community academies, yes.
Yeah. So Jackie Bautista, who's the behavioral health coordinator, did participate in the presentation with the district command team, and so she talked about the program generally. But the MIHU itself has only been operating for about 2.5 weeks, and so it's not like this has been a long-term thing. So as we're getting it up and running, we're talking about it because we've been building it for a while. Okay. But as the chief said, we're not ready for people to contact us directly. And so it's more talking about it, what it's intended to be than what it is at this point.
Okay. And I also just want to mention in general, the virtual academies, those academies are not just for people who love HPD. If you want to learn more about that, about those groups, you should participate. You should learn more about what they do, no matter what you're advocating for. So just in general, feel free to participate in that. And then I agree with Cynthia Nunes. I think we can do in the future choose our language carefully when we are announcing updates regarding these initiatives, acknowledge what's happening in our own backyard, and do it in a way that is just sensitive. So I agree with Councilmember Marquez and Cynthia Nunes on that. And then I think if we are still having issues with needing to have PD on site, because we do want to make sure that people who are operating these programs are comfortable. Are we looking at expediting alternative methods to getting services other than 911? Because people do not want to dial 911 when they feel that PD should not be present. So are we going to start expediting the alternatives to that? And is it possible we can work with 211 to make it be more effective in the interim?
So the challenge is 211 is an independent agency, not operated by the city. So and it's countywide. So I think the better, option is to look at how we can internally work to change the call center so that there's alternate options for people to talk with individuals. So that's what we're looking at. But, we can obviously do a lot of referrals to 211 if there's services that are needed. But again, we don't manage how their services are provided or what services they're providing.
Okay. Can I add to that so there's the national rollout of 988 will ultimately impact this project. And I think the state and the county are trying to figure out what that looks like. And so we're participating in those conversations, monitoring it, because I think that could end up being a good option for that. But we don't know what that's going to look like yet. But that's another factor we're considering. And I've heard some talk about 988 and the 211 system and the access system and the 911 dispatch center system all being integrated in some way. And again, that's not the city's job to figure out, but we're participating and sharing information as we can in those conversations.
Okay. Emily, thank you for jumping on that. I was going to say the same thing about that system coming online soon. But the other piece is to the city manager's point. We're looking at our dispatch center now, doing an assessment to make sure, they were designated as the true first responders a couple of years back, a designation they had been trying to get for a very long time. And they were finally able to get it because
Chief, we aren't hearing you. You're muted.
Oh, I apologize.
We were hearing you just in the last few seconds. Okay.
Okay. And so we're doing an assessment of our dispatch center to integrate some of the things that we've been talking about and learning about in these community discussions to make it better, because we've all heard the national outcry over some of the calls that have come in that have led to some horrible things. And we're all familiar with the term bias by proxy of folks calling. And as we see some of these things unfolding nationally, it makes it all the more important for us to make sure that we do have a robust 911 system. And quite frankly, some of these calls, what we don't want to do is have them going in places they shouldn't. And by the time we realize a mistake's been made, a life's been lost. So we are definitely looking at reimagining our communication, our dispatch center, so that they're better trained and equipped to deal with some of these issues that we've been discussing in this session tonight.
Okay. And then just another question. I know we've talked about this, but John George and ER, it seems like this is just not enough. So what does council need to do in order to provide some advocacy for our city to get the services we need? Or
I can answer that. I mean, I can offer one answer to that, and that is lobby all of our county supervisors.
Yeah.
But yes.
I kind of get into that, Mayor. But
I think, the county has been working with service providers to find alternate ways to provide those services, because I think, I've been particularly in conversations with our staff team, with county staff. Hayward actually has the highest percentage by population of 5150 calls in the county, even higher than Oakland or Berkeley. Yeah. So when you look at, and I think this is the challenge we face with some of the concerns we hear from residents, is a lot of the folks who are unhoused on our streets are ones who are facing severe mental crisis and are not candidates for the navigation center, but they're also not candidates for John George or for hospitalization. And there's no place for them. There's no home. There's no shelter that will take them. And so we're actually having some really interesting conversations right now with some opportunities. So hopefully in the next 6 months, we'll have some things, interesting things that we can present to the council. We've been working with some of our community partners, nonprofits, and county staff. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some ideas for how do we do that, because yes, the capacity at John George is one of our key issues in terms of severe mental health crises.
Yep. So I would say that for callers who are calling in tonight, also call the county supervisors to get us more resources to help address some of these issues that we're having in our city. And that's really all I wanted to ask and say tonight, and just acknowledge that this is a start. This is not the end of this project. This is not the end of trying to make some change. And we acknowledge where we're not getting it right. We heard the chief of fire acknowledged that we need to do more outreach, but they're trying to be cautious. That we're going to roll out more data. We're going to keep connecting with the community, and we want you to keep telling us where we need to make improvements, because the city is really trying to do something here. So just want to acknowledge everyone's efforts. I know this is a very difficult topic, so thank you all to the callers as well for calling in on this.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lamnon.
Thank you. I want to follow up on a couple of things. So this was in a different order than I was thinking. So I'll just start from the top of my list and I'll come back. So yeah, I wanted to add to the comment about that, the the city really started looking at, and Chief Contreras can correct me on the timeline, but years ago, there was early conversations about alternative responses and culture changes in in policing. And I think things started really in earnest in 2018, and then the activities that were outlined in the slide deck. So it does take time for culture change, and things happen in that time that we don't want to happen. And things are now happening that we really have wanted for a long time. And I really want to appreciate the Rockstar team that is leading this effort, and all of the people that are involved in making these things happen. And I do hear the commitment to being responsive and inclusive and compassionate, to make sure that we heard the community well, that we're doing what the community said. And to the extent that it's working, we're hearing good things. To the extent that it's not working, we're listening to that too. And I really want to appreciate that what's being led here is significant and lasting culture change. And I continue my commitment to that. I know everybody else is. And I'm hearing that, and I'm just really wanting to reflect back massive amounts of appreciation for that. As the data continues to get figured out how to do it, where to do it, how to capture it, some of the numbers that I'll be looking at or looking for as well, and these are probably already on your list, but I'll mention them now, which is the number of incidents of use of force. Does that go down? Does it change? It's a measure that I'm interested in as we continue to get reports out from these pilot projects. And the other one is the demographics of the people involved in both the traditional approaches, what I'll call the ongoing approaches, and these new approaches. And then if somebody can speak to, I appreciate the engagement, as Dr. Young mentioned, about working with the local nonprofits. And I'm wondering, is there also any engagement with folks with lived experience? I think we put out a call for people, and just wondered if there were any updates on that.
Yeah, I can provide that. So we did an RFI, a request for information, which really was our way of saying, what are we missing? We really care about including this voice, and tell us what we're missing, essentially, to make this program better. We got some interesting responses, primarily from service providers. And so that was good, because these are people we want to talk to. And I also was able to connect with the president of the local NAMI chapter. And so that was a really interesting conversation that he, from that, reached out to me, and we had a great conversation. So we're making our efforts. I think we still don't quite know the best way to incorporate it as a formalized partnership. And that's something that we're thinking a lot about and talking about in the next phase of our rollout. We've been focusing on getting the teams up and running, and that's sort of one of our next horizons.
And I can jump
go ahead.
Just a piece of that also. Sure. To what Dr. Young is explaining is the need to phase our approach with and have measurable outcomes is key. Just to respond and not change the outcome is like, I think that was Einstein's theory of doing the same thing over and over again. I butcher things, metaphors like that, but it really doesn't make a lot of sense to keep doing the same thing. We already know what the cracks in the system is. What the void is, and it's been touched on a lot here, is the fact that our society only allows for emergency patients to be transported to emergency rooms or the highest level mental health facility. And there's all these other resources that are key. And we did not blow off the lived experience piece at all. Matter of fact, Emily and I have had countless hours and hours long conversation of how to capture that. But to give you a little context, last Friday when the Mobile Integrated Health Unit was in service, of the, I believe, 7 patients they contacted, they would have needed literally 7 different lived experiences to consult with, because they were all different. And one of the overarching dictates that we've put out to the team is to spend the time with each individual and get to definitive care. They're very accustomed to dealing with emergent, and as many as call, we respond. And we're trying to get them to change to no, get it to finality, get it to solution, and then see in a snapshot what resources were required to find the solution. Because a lot of the resources are going to be, and Emily and I talked about it this morning, it might be an admin clerk that is doing follow-up with Sutter Health and Kaiser and these other folks to make sure that those connections that are there are followed through with. A lot of times we learn we've got residents on the other end that grandma doesn't know what's going on and the kids are not familiar and it's not being communicated, and the patient is just circling, getting passed around and passed around. We want to stop passing it off, get people to definitive care, to the right receiving facility. And I really can't stress enough, we need that AB 1544 to be able to do that. When you mentioned, council member, that we were close about 8 years ago, we were really close. When we pulled out of the statewide pilot as the Hayward Fire Department was when they refused to grant us the alternate destination, because now you're just asking us to go collect data, but don't solve the problem. Just show us how bad the problem is, but don't fix it, because we're not going to give you the tools. For the first time in our state's history, the California Physicians Association has signed on to allow for alternate destination for patients to be transported outside of emergency room. Huge step. And we've got to let that grow and turn that into our solution for how to get people to definitive care. So sorry to jumping in there, but it seemed that germane.
Certainly. And I deeply appreciate that, getting people to meaningful resolution. You said it better than I did, but that lens, I have lived experience of, trying to help people get through the systems, and they end up on East 14th Street because there was no continuity of care. And so the fact that you're engaging at the state level. Hi there. Go ahead.
Sorry. There's a lot of opportunity we're experiencing where we're finding folks, or the crews that are out doing the work and they're sharing the stories, are finding situations where people maybe there was an incident with one individual who had been involved in a shooting, and she was really upset in our personnel's interaction with the questions that the police department were asking her. She just didn't understand. When that was explained without any accusations in a calm setting, post-incident follow-up, explain why it was so important that the law enforcement, and we won't try and speak for them, but we have familiarity enough to know why it's important to know, suspect information and things like that in the moment. And to the staff's engagement with her to realize that she just needed some closure. She wasn't really angry or upset anymore. She was scared, confused, and needed some explanation. And I mean, we're really finding that that's a lot of what goes on. I think in our work and in law enforcement's work, we're caught up in the routine of the day-to-day, and we don't take enough time to realize that the average resident doesn't know what's happening in those situations. And we need to take a breath and explain those situations, especially for those that have experienced any form of trauma. So sorry to belabor it, but I just really want to, send that message home that, our PD is stepping up and trying everything imaginable to make positive change. I'm watching it in real time, and it's a little bit, hard to watch, but we've got to shoulder the scrutiny together and fix it so that there aren't these feelings anymore. And I feel like everyone that I work with on these teams, including our boss and the city manager, is like fully engaged as much as anything I've ever seen in any endeavor. So,
and Chief Contreras hits the nail on the head about why all these things kind of link together and why it's important for each piece to work with each other piece, because having the community service officers go out does free up the time for the officers to spend that time and explain the process to the victims of these crimes and not rush to the next call, from that call to the next call to the next call. And so, having everybody working together. And just earlier tonight, speaking of the collaborative piece that's going on, just coming here tonight to sit for this, I heard call where fire went out initially, and PD were also asked to respond, but they asked dispatch to get a hold of fire to ask if they still needed to be present on scene, and the fire said, no, we've got it. I mean, just that little communication piece and just everyone working together and pulling in the same direction, you know, it's already yielding huge amounts of fruit. Obviously, we don't want to be here all night and talk about it, but it is definitely working out, and staff on all levels of the city are really collaborating, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. I mean, we are really getting to a place where, quite frankly, a year or two ago didn't look like we'd ever make it to.
All right. Thank you.
Can I try and wrap up what I was going to say?
Yes, please. Councilmember Randall.
Thank you. Okay, so I appreciate your passion, gentlemen, and I was trying to reflect that I absolutely am seeing that, and I appreciate you saying it so that the community can hear that as well. What I was trying to indicate in my comments was really that level of communication, of collaboration, doesn't always happen at the county level, outside of the city. You know, I appreciate the work that's being done in the city and the continued commitment to that. Where my challenge has been is that it's not happening outside of the city. And so I'm appreciating that there is the engagement at the state level to try and get the changes that are needed to support our work. And I am on board for whatever would help to fix things at the county level. And then the last thing I wanted to say about that was also I appreciated the comments about 988 and, you know, thinking about how do we do fund 211 every year out of the CSC money. So what do we need to do to integrate this whole system, as you were saying, Dr. Young, that this becomes really a continuum of care from the time the person picks up the phone through the end of the session, as Chief Contreras is saying. Thank you.
I'll jump on the what do we do part. We implement emergency medical dispatch in our dispatch center when we make that recommendation. I believe that's what's going to be one of the key recommendations coming out of the consultants' work. That allows for a much more sophisticated level of triage over the phone to only send the appropriate. So what Chief Chaplain was just explaining, that's on scene triage, right? We already triaged it and realized there's no threat, there's no need for PD, canceled. And that is the ultimate goal. We need to get that happening at an even higher level in the dispatch center. And that's why we're doing it all together. You know, I think we all wish that we were at that end date of this whole effort. And at the end of the pilots, and we were just kind of making it all work. We know that that's a barrier, right? The comm center, as great as the people are that work in there, they're going to be asked to change their dynamic and change the way they stay on the call. I think there was an earlier conversation about what that process is, and Deputy Chief Matthews answered, you know, generally we have a call taker and a dispatcher, right? That call taker, sometimes if it's busy, they're rushed. Other times they have a moment to get some real thorough information. But what happens in Hayward without emergency medical dispatch, and it's kind of a catch-all term, is the live caller gets transferred for emergency pre-arrival instructions. Once that live transfer is made to ACRAC, the county dispatch center, that connectivity to follow up and get further information and distill down is gone. We want to get to the point to where there's no need for live transfer because the same service that's being transferred for is being provided in-house. Once we do that, we can customize it for Hayward, for our community, and we can say these call types get this type of response, as opposed to putting everyone in similar buckets and hoping for the best, knowing that it's wrong 3 to 7% of the time based on the information that's being provided by the caller. So if we get to what Nirvana is, we will have a nurse in a dispatch center that is triaging out a lot of these calls just to that 998 service that's now going to be required. I think 2023 is the deadline. Maybe it's 24. I'm not necessarily a fan of an alternative number because I believe in proper triaging, coming in through a single public safety answering point and getting the appropriate resource. So as Chief Chaplain mentioned, we don't miss any call taker. It's always going to be a 7% fail rate, and we don't want to see that 7% cost a life. Those are statistics that are just too big to roll the dice on. Hope that answers a long-winded way your simple question.
I hope so too. Councilmember Lamnon?
I wasn't actually asking a question, but I always appreciate the information. So thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And now Councilmember Wahab, waiting patiently for her turn there.
I appreciate it. I appreciate everything. I appreciate, my colleagues asking all the different questions, as well as the commenters that provided their, viewpoint of what they've been seeing, and also obviously staff for kind of going through this. I remember when I brought up bringing fire into the mix of this, right? And I know that I had some calls after I said it on council as to, fire asked, what exactly are you talking about involving a fire on 911 calls? And I think that we're getting there. I think that we're genuinely, the concept of, there is a city, I will say, in the Bay Area that actually has firefighters and police officers actually doing the same work. I don't necessarily recommend the model 100%, but, for us, it is the collaboration, it is the team work that needs to be done. And, I do want to highlight a couple of things. For me, it was, I went on a couple of different ride-alongs with our PD, and there are things that we as the public don't realize that they deal with, right? I remember specifically at midnight, there was this call that came in that said that there's somebody kind of walking on the train tracks, kind of a little, the neighbors didn't know what was going on, things like that. We went to that call, and the officer that I was with, he was kind of explaining that when they arrive to a call where they don't know what to expect, right? And if it is a mental health call, oftentimes police officers themselves are concerned that that individual does not commit suicide by cop. And, that was the first time I was like, oh, I didn't even think of it like that, right? When you're not in that position, if you're not taking the calls daily, sometimes you forget those nuances. And then when it's said to you, you fully understand it. Like, yes, I could see that. I've seen it in the news. I've heard it, things like that. It turns out that the person, was shunned from their family and didn't have a place to go, and so much more that, we are dealing with in our city, and trauma and so forth. The main point I'd like to say is that I agree that I do not want a different number. And the reason why, and I've said this publicly many times, is because it takes a lot of education to go into different communities, even ethnic communities, immigrant communities, to explain what 211, 311, 411, and all these other new numbers are. My father actually called 911 more recently in the last month and was hospitalized and so forth. And it was not, I've asked him, do you know what 211, 311, 411 is? And he consistently says no, right? So 911, he understands and he can explain his problem. And yes, we have problems with it. I will say that I have met with our call center staff. I have met with our firefighters, some of the leadership there, and as well as our Police Officers Association, to really kind of narrow this down when we were first talking about it. And the concept for me is definitely, if we can kind of get the call center fully staffed, number one, they are working ridiculous hours and very limited staff there. And number two is just making sure that the types of calls that they're getting, that they ask the appropriate questions. And I think that takes time. And to everyone's point regarding data, there's a lack of data, and they use these, to me, outdated systems, and it's, a little old school. It looks like DOS almost, and if we can kind of just make sure that we have the latest and greatest in regards to our call center system. Number two, that we can definitely increase training for our call center staff to make sure that if a 911 call is there, people can ask the appropriate question. Is this person alone? Does this person look like they have a weapon? Does this person look erratic? Whatever the case is, we just need a little bit more training there. And our call center is a very focal point of the information and data that PD and fire get. And if you guys remember from one of the previous council meetings, about 39% of our 911 calls are actually directed to PD. The rest are, dedicated to fire, health, maintenance, just random things like that. So I think data is incredibly important. I will say I was expecting a first quarter report in roughly fall. That was the original intention when we talked about this and kind of coming back to council. We are 6 months in. I would have preferred a little bit more robust data. I think that is fair that everybody is asking for that. Types of calls, even if it's a pilot, we did 150 calls from this month to that month. This is what the original call was about. This is what it ended up being. We can even go backwards on the previous 911 calls, not even with the pilot project in place. So I will say that there is a lack of data that is a little disappointing to not see here tonight. I think staff, need to kind of focus on the numbers. We generally need to take better attention to numbers and reporting out. You have different community groups, and also it makes our case a little bit stronger when we are talking to the county. The NAMI in particular was mentioned this past weekend. I was definitely invited to a rally that actually was talking about yes to hospitals and housing and no to the $318 million that was given to our sheriff. So there is a little bit of a problem at the county level. The county is responsible for social services. That is their main priority, whereas cities are, focused on land use issues and so forth. So I will say that if we are able to do this in-house, and Chief, I know I've talked to you about this, I would like to see a 24/7 operation where we are ensuring that people get the services they need, that we can make sure that, calls are addressed, that dedicated vehicles, dedicated people, dedicated facilities are in Hayward. And I think that the concept and expanding potentially the concept of the Firehouse Clinic and working with these agencies locally, as well as even regionally, to Councilmember Lamnan's point, is very much needed. And if we can just ask the county for that money and we run the show, great. Maybe that's a solution that other cities can model after. I will say that the original request, besides the call center and staffing there, was to remove mental health and homeless calls completely from PD. Granted, I know I spoke to police officers and firefighters. Firefighters, for example, did state that they will not carry a weapon. That was the whole point of this initiative. And number two is the fact that we remove our most vulnerable folks away from any type of interaction that could potentially escalate. DV calls, domestic violence and so forth, are the most dangerous calls, and PD definitely is on scene, and it's very critical that security and safety is priority for our staff. So I think that we just need to kind of identify the types of calls, how we ensure that happens. But the point of this is a separation, collaboration, but separation, right? And this will allow our PD to focus a little bit more on the crimes that are happening, that are true crimes, right? Property theft, again, God forbid, homicides, rapes, a lot of things that are happening. So we see it on a regional level, and we want to free up PD time to take care of those things. So I really do question that a little bit more. We need to see a little bit more of that. And then, also the call center being a center of excellence. I think that was discussed in past conversations. And so Chief Contreras, I still see you as kind of leading that effort and data and so forth and response times. And, I really want to thank our Chief Chaplain, Deputy Chief Matthews, and congratulations on that. And Chief Contreras, just on the effort. I know, one of the things that we have to identify and just admit to ourselves is that I want to say to the public too, is that our staffing is understaffed across the city. Doesn't matter which department you're talking about, number one. We still have to do our day-to-day and make sure that we are addressing the calls that are coming in, addressing the situation that is happening day to day, but at the same time working on a significant shift. And that's kind of what this is. It may be slow, But because people's lives are at stake and it's a more vulnerable population, we do have to kind of maintain that we are very balanced, very fair, very sensitive to the issues. So I really want to thank you guys for coming together and kind of pushing it along. But I will say that there's far more work to be done. And again, as much as possible, if we can be transparent with the folks that have called in, it's great, but also to the general public. We are doing this. We hope that people can be patient with us. And this is kind of the vision we have. There will be bumps in the road, and so much more. And to the rest of the staff that work on this, the GARE team, Dr. Young and her team and so forth, I really appreciate you guys being extremely sensitive to just the scrutiny, right? It's difficult to kind of see where we're going to land on certain issues, but I really want to say we still have a long way to go. And I think that you guys are doing a pretty solid job, but I hope that you guys take today's input. And the overall goal is, again, removing mental health and homeless calls, as well as the full call center, and having collaboration but separation, if you will. So I appreciate, again, everybody's time and comments. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't want to make this go any longer. I appreciate the discussion, though. I know we all care a lot about this program, and that, we've now had the opportunity after 6 months, after some startups. I want to say that I was really pleased with the report and the data that was in it. I think there was some good data. And I would remember that it's not really about the data. It is about the people. It is about the human beings, and each case is different, I'm sure. In fact, because each human is different, each case is different. And I think we all need, as council and members of the public, to keep in mind how difficult this job is. And I am really proud of our staff for diving into this and following what I think we as council and the members of the public who participated in those policy discussions asked you to do. I am really pleased with the amount of progress that has been made, because this is not an easy thing to do. So with that said, I think clearly the major partner we need in this now, or additional partner, and it is a partner already, is the county, because the county gets the money to provide the medical and mental health services. And so we need to have a better working relationship with, that other partner. And, and I will say that the mayors, as I've said before, the mayors of Alameda County are, regularly meeting and mostly in terms of discussing issues around housing and homelessness, but a lot of that ties into need for better mental health services. People who are out on the street are often out on the street because there just isn't a suitable place for them to live and be treated and be cared for in a way that makes them feel safe and helps them get well. And that has been a big problem. And so all of this will help to get there, but I still think it's going to take a lot of time, because we're just not there yet. But we're not, and the other cities have these problems too. And so we're all trying to work together. And I really would say that to the extent that any of you have relationships with not just our own, and I'm not trying, I know they're all trying to do it too. All 5 county supervisors are trying to make this work, but it just, it's hard to change the way you've always done things, maybe, or I don't know, but we all need to keep working on this. So to the extent that you have those relationships or have opportunities, please talk to not just our own county supervisor, who I think is usually a pretty good listener and tries to respond, but all of them. So, and then I just, the CSO, I'm really pleased to hear how that is going, the property crimes and taking, sworn officers a little bit more out of that and letting the CSOs handle it. And I am wondering, and I think we should talk about at the budget time what we can do to increase. I didn't like hearing that it was on volunteer overtime, and I think we need to talk about what we do to change that. And then on the people's budget, and in general on the website, it's hard to keep websites up to real time, but to the extent that we can, and especially on the people's budget stuff, I would like to. I had a little trouble. I mean, there's a whole list of projects, but really what is coming out of this in a more defined way that people will be able to vote on. I mean, I suppose we can vote too if we all live in one of those 6 districts. And so just maybe a little more update on the website about how this is going to unfold going forward now. But I will say that I went to a lot of the pop-ups in the park, and they went really well. I mean, and it seemed like what we need to do in the future is go where the people are, not ask the people to come where we set up. So, and the ones where people were going, the ones I really liked was at Mia's Dream Park, where people are just bringing their kids, but stopping by to learn about what was going on and to give their input. So I hope some really good ideas come out of the people's budget. And that's really all I have to say right now. The working on the mental health facilities and treatment programs that we have available in this county is now, I think, a top priority for everybody to be thinking about and talking about, because that will really help a lot. And I mean, we can do all the first responder, we can really improve that system. But until you have some place where people truly can be treated and made well, we're going to just, once we have that, we may see much less of a need for these kinds of calls. So I'll leave it at there, and with apologies to everyone who may have been here to get us to the next item. But thank you all for your input, and especially thank you all for the work you have put into this. I really appreciate it. And the collaboration among departments is just, I very much encourage that to continue, and I think it will lead to good things. So with that, we are now going to, and again, with apologies to the people who may have been waiting here through that one, we are moving to item number 5, which is a public hearing on the Point Eden Way U-Haul facility. This is in response to, this is an appeal of a planning commission denial of the development. And also it is a follow-up to a meeting we had, I believe that was December 15th, right? When we last saw this project, and we had a number of questions and suggestions for the developer. And so now it has come back to us, and are we going to start this one off with Ms. Schmidt? I see you there, ready to go. Okay. With our acting principal planner, Ms. Schmidt. Nope, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
Screen, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Okay, and can you see the PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
Good. Oh, thank you so much, Mayor and members of the City Council. So this is an item that was continued from the December 15th meeting, as you pointed out, and it's related to site plan review and historic resources demolition permit and related environmental analysis for a new proposed U-Haul development at 4150 Point Eden Way. The item was continued, and the applicant was given very specific feedback from the City Council, which is what the staff report and this presentation will mainly focus on tonight. So tonight I'm going to briefly talk about the project. We'll get into those key issues. I'm going to mention the environmental impact report because that's an important component of this project. We'll run through the findings and conditions, and then I will provide a recommendation. So this is the proposed project site. It includes a western component and an eastern component. The western component is about 32 acres. It's undeveloped baylands and wetlands. And then there's a 6.8 acre site on the eastern component, which is the subject of the development proposal. The eastern component is generally undeveloped except for an approximately 12,300 square foot structure just up here at the northern part of the site. The structure was previously used as a salt production plant for the Oliver Brothers Salt Company that operated in the first half of the 20th century. The structure is dilapidated and it has been used by squatters over the past several decades. However, it is listed on the State Register of Historic Resources due to its importance in the historic salt mining and processing industry that occurred not only on the site, but in the surrounding area. And then just to orient you, State Route 92 runs along the northern property line. There's industrial development to the east. The Bay Trail is shown here in red. It runs along State Route 92 and then turns between the two industrial properties before it heads east again. The site is generally surrounded by baylands and undeveloped land, except for the industrial development to the east. So this would be the westernmost developable parcel of our industrial district. Here's the site plan. It does include construction of a new industrial building that's about 116,800 square feet in size. About 114,000 square feet of that would be used as a warehouse, and the remaining 2,700 square feet would be used as an office. And that office is placed right here up at the front of the building. It would house the regional and corporate offices for U-Haul, and the warehouse portion would house U-Haul storage pods, materials, and trucks. And when operational, the applicant has estimated about 50 people will work here. Access to the site would be from Point Eden Way. It's the terminus of the street. There'd be a total of 79 parking spaces, and about 16% of the site would be landscaped. And I don't have a detail of it, but they have a nice sort of employee amenity area up here at the front, some nice landscaping and design details at the front of the site. In addition, as part of the project, the Bay Trail would be realigned and it would not run between the two industrial properties. Rather, it would run along the northern property line and then run along the western part of the site to take advantage of the views of the bay instead of being sandwiched between two industrial sites. Here's a rendering of the building. It would feature varying roof lines and projecting glass encased office area right up at the front. So that's what you would see from State Route 92. It'd have a mix of architectural materials and colors, some sort of vertical and horizontal elements to break up the building massing. And then the elevations facing State Route 92 and the bay would feature artistic elements such as like bird sculptures, and then some green accent metal panels that reflect the sort of surrounding wildlife and grasses. So key issues that were brought up at the December 15th meeting. The first one was related to labor negotiations. The applicant did continue to have conversations with labor groups and entered into an agreement with Swinnerton, who is a union general contractor. I do believe that they submitted a letter of support for the project. The applicant was also asked to identify an area on the site for future gateway signage and discuss a contribution to that signage. The applicant has identified 2 sites, and there is a contribution condition, which I'll discuss in a moment. And then reuse of historic materials on site. There was mainly just questions about what will they do, what would be reused. So basically all the really good lumber that's in the building that they'll salvage that lumber and they will reuse it to construct interpretive sign features, and salt processing equipment that was found on the site will be, like the Archimedes screw, will be retained and cleaned up and put on display both at the site and I do believe the applicant has talked to the Historic Society about displaying it there as well. So I just wanted to briefly show the 2 potential locations for the gateway signage. One is right here, and then the other one is right there. They're both about 100 square feet in size. And there is a new proposed condition of approval that would require that they provide this sign area, one of the 2 areas, and that they contribute 1/3 of 1% of the building valuation towards the design, fabrication, and or installation of the sign. And that contribution amount, apologies, the 1/3 of 1% was based on the amount that Gillig gave towards public art on their site. And the Gillig development project was the large-scale industrial development just on the other side of State Route 92. So staff used a very similar wording for this condition because it was accepted by decision makers as well as the applicant. So doing a rough calculation of that, the applicant has previously indicated the building valuation would be about $13 million. 1/3 of 1% would be about $42,900. And I want to point out that the staff report and the resolution contained a typo, and I wrote out 1/3 of 1%, but in parentheses, I put the wrong decimal. So it's not supposed to be 0.33, it's supposed to be 0.0033. And so while the text was correct, the decimal was incorrect. And I do want to point that out, that in the event that the council does want to approve the project, that condition, just what's in the parentheses would have to change. Some other key issues that were discussed on December 15th included conversations around sea level rise and just wanting some clarification. Staff did, engineering staff, as well as the planner that worked on the master plan, the shoreline adaptation master plan, put together a sort of like general primer about floodplain ordinance, the master plan, how they fit together, how this project, where it falls there. And basically, like, just to summarize it, the proposed structure is above the floodplain, and it wouldn't be impacted. However, there are parts of the site that could experience inundation with future sea level rise. And that's the parking lot and the loading dock. There was also discussion of bird strikes and the potential for it. The building does use a non-reflective glass and includes all those vertical and horizontal elements that you saw earlier. And those are recommended by the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife in order to prevent bird strikes. In addition, the building's only about 50 feet high, so it's not really like some gigantic, glass pillar that is, really high up in the sky. So it's unlikely that it would result in many bird strikes, if any. There was also questions about the use of permeable pavers on the site or permeable concrete, and engineers took a look at the site and said it wasn't recommended due to the underlying soils and high water table. And then finally, there was a question about being able to add some buffer landscaping between State Route 92 and the proposed trail realignment for noise buffering, and just to make it a more pleasant experience. But because of the constraints of the site and the fact that that land, it's on Caltrans land, they would have to shrink the trail down and wouldn't be able to provide the trail width as it is now. So it was determined to be infeasible. So briefly, it's in the resolution, it's in the staff report from the December 15th meeting, but there was a very robust environmental process for this. It started with an initial study that did identify that there were impacts in various areas. The draft EIR that was developed out of that initial study determined that all the impacts could be mitigated to a level of less than significant, except for those related to cultural resources. And even though there were mitigation measures that were adopted, such as documenting the historic building on site, reusing some of the materials, the impact does remain significant and unavoidable because you're removing a designated historic resource. Therefore, the City Council, if you approve the project, would have to adopt a statement of overriding considerations related to the project. So staff does believe that the council can make the findings to approve the site plan review. It's consistent with the general plan goals and policies. It enhances the visual character of the site. It would result in development of a warehouse on an industrial property where warehouses are permitted. It would feature a glass fronted building with an office appearance, at least from State Route 92. It would result in an increase in property taxes and signal reinvestment in this area on the site. It would result in realignment of the Bay Trail, and the structure and the Bay Trail would be located above the floodplain. Finally, there are conditions of approval All of these were discussed before. They include realignment in conjunction with the East Bay Regional Park District to make sure that it meets all the design standards, that the lights in the building be turned off at night. This was a request from the people that work out at the shoreline, saying that those industrial buildings that stay on all night really do impact the biological species out there. So to minimize spillover lighting, the lights would come down at night. The proposed 32-acre preserve would be subject to a conservation easement, so it would remain undeveloped in perpetuity and maintained. And all the mitigation measures were made conditions of approval of the project. The two new conditions, which were underlined in the resolution that you saw, 6 and 7, do require the applicant to set aside land and then make that contribution of 1/3 of 1% of the building valuation toward the sign. So with that, staff does recommend that the City Council overturn the Planning Commission denial and approve site plan review and historic demolition permit for the proposed U-Haul development, and certify the EIR related findings and adopt the mitigation monitoring and reporting program and statement of overriding considerations prepared for the project. The applicant has asked to make a brief presentation following me prior to us opening it up to questions, if that's okay with you, Mayor Halliday, and members of the council.
Yes, as long, I'd ask you to keep it brief, not following our own example. And because certainly after sitting through all this, yes, we will give you that opportunity. I assume that's Mr. Owen, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So do you want to go ahead, Mr. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, council members. Appreciate your time this evening. It's been a little bit since we got together. Of course, my name is Jerry. I'm the marketing company president for U-Haul the East Bay. I just want to thank city staff for the presentation, also working with my team to address the comments discussed for the last meeting. Obviously, additionally, we're excited to announce that we are teamed up with Swinnerton for the project. We think they're really, really got a lot of experience in the area, and I think their work with local labor is going to be huge for us if we're able to go forward with the project. My project team is available on the call. All of them are, if they have any questions. I would like to actually ask my architect, Renata Tyler. She's going to present the PowerPoint for us and go over it.
Hey, good evening, Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council members. And my name is Renata Tyler, and I am the project architect for this development. Thank you again for the opportunity to address this council. We're all here tonight seeking your approval for the proposed development at Point Eden Way. We would like to take this opportunity to thank city staff for the support and guidance provided in the last 2.5 years. The ER documentation staff report include a comprehensive and detailed presentation and description of the project. So we're going to keep it really short. We would like to share with you the historical preservation compliance process. So at this time, I would like to invite the project architectural historian Ed to address the comments that we heard in the last hearing. Ed, are you still there?
I think he is. I see him.
Yes. Do we have the presentation? Can you pull up the presentation, Renata?
Yeah, I believe Leah will be sharing shortly. Leah, let me know if you want me to. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. So basically, part of the project has been looking for compliance with the federal regulations too, and for a 404 permit with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and that means that the project has to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, called Section 106 in shorthand, which is really the most rigorous compliance pathway for historic properties and historical resources generally. And those standards means that we have to resolve the adverse effects, just like Leah was sharing about the CEQA findings, that for the federal pathway, it's also necessary, compliance pathway, it's also necessary to meet these high standards. And basically, when you have a National Register listed property like this, that is documented, but that has since fallen into a really poor state of repair. Arson, there's the building's in very bad condition. And frankly, it will be demolished by nature within the next few years if it's not by permit. This building, so conveying the historical values of this property going forward for the Hayward area, we were engaged with the Hayward Area Historical Society and Diane Curry. And next slide, please. Hi, Leah, are you able to go to the next slide, please?
She did. Is this not it? Oh.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I have a very weak connection, so I think it comes up slowly for me. Okay, so basically, there's 5 stipulations that we have put forward towards the. Sorry, could you go back one, please? That we've put forward towards this. They include protective fencing for important historical resources on the site. And really, because of the nature of the processing of the site, a lot of the significance is the cultural landscape. So really the landscape of salt mining basically on the bay is preserved in this plan, including the 32-acre easement on the western end. And so stipulations 1, 2, and 3 of our agreement with the federal reviewers include important features in this landscape, including the overall features of the evaporation ponds, saltwater evaporation ponds, the valves, the canals, the internal railroad tracks that were there, that some are still in place. We go to the next slide, please. Sorry, it's probably going to take me a moment to see it. Okay, so you can see here, these are examples of some of the canals and the valves that are proposed for protection under our built environment treatment plan. And this treatment plan that is being under review right now with the federal agency and the State Historic Preservation Office, this is going to be a requirement that these things are implemented, and that we in the end then prove it to the Army Corps of Engineers that we have implemented them. Next slide, please. Here's another example. There'll be cleanup for safety. There's additional fencing required under these stipulations. And here you see valves and sump pumps. Next slide, please. This is all spelled out in a lengthy report that defines these stipulations in much more detail. And we've already begun monitoring reports to show that we're in earnest about following these directions if the project is approved by the city. Here you see on the left objects like some spikes remaining from the railroad system. Again, the kind of landscape that's characteristic that people will be looking over from the Bay Trail. Next slide, please. Sorry for the delay. It just doesn't come onto my screen. There we are. Okay, and then also to model after and to integrate with the Hayward Nature Center on the other side of 92 that is then connected by the Bay Trail to this site. We would have interpretive signage designed not only by, as you can see in the middle image here, designed by the Hayward Area Historical Society. This is a first draft. We're going to work on it further. And then moving the Archimedes screw that you see on the left there, so that it's adjacent to the sign. And the sign would be something perhaps modeled after this one on the right that's currently on the other side of the 92, using salvage material from the salt works, this oversized, often circular cut sawn to build the signs. Also using that salvage material in the pergola and the employee amenities area in the landscape as you approach the building, and further in public interpretation through signage in the building, including the possibility of a mural in the lobby. So the way we've looked at it is basically you have a historical resource that is being lost to time, to entropy. And this is a way to keep this important part of Hayward's history alive, preserve a great deal of the most important character-defining features of the site, and to make it approachable not only for Bay Trail users, but we've talked to Diane Curry, who has extensive experience dealing with local schools, public schools, to make that available and approachable to students of all ages and make it a destination along the Bay Trail. And then the last slide, please. And then further, the option of an additional signage that would address natural resources. My colleague Hope has designed this, but there's possibilities for additional natural resources interpretation along the Bay Trail as well. And that concludes what I wanted to say. Of course, I'm happy to answer questions.
All right. Thank you. And Mr. Owen, is that it for your presentation?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm going to go ahead and open this up now to council for any questions you have at this point. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So we'll go, are there any? Okay. So we'll go to, I'll open public comment on this item. And we have a few hands up here. So Jesus Madera.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of City Council. My name is Jesus Madera. I am a third period carpenter apprentice out of Local 713 in Hayward. I started my career as a carpenter working at the Cherryland School here in Hayward and worked on a few other cool projects as well, along with helping build townhomes in Alameda. Since the start of the pandemic, work has been slow, but as things are picking back up, I am ready to get to work and earn some good money. During this time, I've been taking as many classes as I can at the Carpenter School in Pleasanton and have been certified as a welder, among other certifications as well. The U-Haul project would create work opportunities for apprentices as myself and others, and also to improve and learn more skills as a carpenter. This is why I urge City Council to push this project through to help people as myself get back to work. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Nick Souza.
Good evening. My name is Nicholas Souza. I'm a union member out of 713. Since I've started my career as a carpenter October 8th of 2021, my life has changed dramatically for the better. I became homeless in 2020 during the pandemic. I had lost everything. I didn't know where my next meal was going to come from. So either I stayed there feeling sorry for myself, or I was going to get up and do something about it. So I chose to do something about it. I went to a pre-apprenticeship called Cypress Mandela in Oakland, California. From Cypress, I was indentured into the carpenter's apprenticeship. Not only did the apprenticeship and the union give me an opportunity to get some money in my pocket, but it gave me an opportunity at life and to be an overall better person. I have so much gratitude for the chance that I've been given. I'm in all favor of union-related jobs. Let's build a better world together. With that being said, I ask that you would approve this project so that people like me would have an opportunity to better their lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have, it looks like call-in user 1.
Hello.
Yes. Go
Hi,
ahead.
good evening, everyone. My name is Edeline Bation, and I'm an East Bay resident that works in close proximity where the proposed development is. Having a well-designed building with a walking trail that will be beneficial for employees like me, and it will give people who are employed in the area like myself a destination where we can actually walk outdoors during our breaks. So please vote to approve this proposed development. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Margaret Gabriel.
Mayor, could we go to the next speaker? I believe Ms. Gabriel is unable.
Oh, hello.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there.
Ms. Gabriel?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Margaret Gabriel. I am a small business owner in the city of Hayward, and I would like to state my support for the U-Haul project development off of Highway 92. Not only that this project may increase the economic status of the city, but it will also fill a void that has been an eyesore for decades. I encourage you all to vote yes to approve these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tony Munoz.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Tony Munoz. I am a field representative for the NoCal Carpenters Union at a local 713, which is located here in Hayward. We represent roughly about 4,000 members out of our local, and approximately about 1,000 of those members live here in the city of Hayward. I'm here tonight speaking in support of U-Haul's East Bay headquarters. Over the years, many of us have taken that drive across the San Mateo Bridge from Foster City to Hayward. We've all noticed the old yellow Oliver Salt Company building. It's the first building we see entering Hayward. And over time, we have also noticed the condition of this building worsening, and starting to fall apart. And right now, we have the opportunity to replace that aging building with a new one. And that new building is the headquarters. U-Haul has committed to build their headquarters the right way, checked off some important boxes for the new building. They started off by committing to improve and relocate the Bay Trail to accommodate those people who are, they're tired of this pandemic and they just want to enjoy an outdoor walk. They are willing to contribute land and funds for a new sign welcoming folks to the city of Hayward. The last time here, we had asked for some additional time to finalize a couple of things. And, today, I would say that working with Jerry Owen and his team, we have reached an agreement. We do have a letter of intent to use the union signatory contract on this project. And the folks at U-Haul are working with one of the top companies in the Bay Area with Swinnerton to have their headquarters built. This project will have union labor. It will create jobs for apprentices to train on. It will pay labor standards, and it will provide benefits for members working on these projects. The NorCal Carpenters ask that you help create these job opportunities and approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Jorgensen and Chetta.
Hi there, Mayor and council members. I'd like to express my support also. I guess everybody is here for the U-Haul development in Point Eden Way. I've lived here all my life. We have property and businesses here in Hayward, and anything that improves the goodwill and the image of Hayward, also things that attracts businesses and also gives you a nice big fat business tax would be great for the city and everybody else. And if you can get some .coms to get in here, that'd be great too. And for 9:30, you guys look pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you. We try. Next, we have Diane Curry.
Hi, Mayor Halliday and council members. This is Diane Curry. I'm the executive director of the Hayward Area Historical Society. I just wanted to say that the Historical Society is very interested and excited with the opportunity to work on signage, interpretive signage, to talk about Oliver Brothers salt plant and any other additional signage that's going to be appropriate for the landscape out there. It's an important story to tell about the history of the Hayward area, and I think we can do a good job with telling that, since we have the photos and stuff. So we're very excited with the opportunity that U-Haul is presenting with this facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Marlena Selva.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for this opportunity. I am currently a member on the board of directors of Ohlone Audubon Society, and I am also a Hayward resident, born and raised in Hayward. I'm also Mescalero Apache Native American, as well as Nahua people of Nicaragua throughout Central America. And I'm speaking from an indigenous perspective as well as environmentalist, asking that we shift our perspective in terms of knowing that this project should not be approved because of the irreversible environmental destruction to what we think of as our relatives. We don't see nature as something outside of us. We see it as something we are part of. We don't see natural resources as that. We see the birds and all the other living organisms as our relatives. And we have been dealing with this for over 500 years since European explorers landed on this continent. And we see people of color losing sight of where we come from and who we are all as human beings, that industrialism makes money, but it destroys everyone's lives. We're all going to pay for this. It's something that you may not be able to see now, but it's going to be a very serious consequence in terms of this destruction of even the life of an ant. And until you understand that everything is related, everything, there is no hierarchy, and that when you choose it's not about Democrat or Republican, it's not about capitalism, it's about industrialism, and that is the core of the destruction of life and the destruction of the human being. You have forgotten, we have all forgotten how to be human beings, and we destroy things, everything under the ground, in the soil, underneath the soil, the insects, not just the trees, not just pollute. And this causes significant light pollution and air pollution and soil degradation that is irreversible. So this project is not recommended to be approved because of these reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Jim Sales.
Yes, hello?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jim Salas, and I'm a lifelong East Bay resident. I'm also a residential realtor, mainly focused in the East Bay. I fully support the Mount Eden or Point Eden Way U-Haul facility project. After reviewing the project plans, I believe that the facility would be an improvement to the aesthetics of the existing land. I also believe that the addition of the U-Haul facility in Hayward would help the city's economy through the influx of labor and workers that will want to live, dine, and be entertained in the city of Hayward. So please vote yes for the Point Eden U-Haul facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salas is the last hand raised I see from our attendees. Madam City Clerk, are you aware of, we just have another, no, that was Mr. Salas. Are you aware of anyone else who wishes to speak?
No, I'm not, Mayor.
Okay, so I'm going to close public comment. and go back to council for comments and possibly a motion. Council Member Zermano.
Mayor, thank you. Ms. Smith, thank you very much for the report. Very good job. Thank you all the callers. I do feel a little bit for Ms. Selva because I'm also a member of the Audubon Society, but so taking her thoughts into consideration and along with the other positives. So in my mind, there are more positives than there are negatives in this particular project. I believe it will be a good gateway into our city from the Hayward San Mateo Bridge. We asked the project manager, the owners, to do a couple of items to take care of a couple of issues that were important to us, and they did so. And that, in my mind, means that they followed through, they're serious about it. As somebody mentioned, that it will be a definite improvement also. The fact that the owners actually did go out and negotiate with our unions, I think that's tremendous. Union jobs is something that's key to us. Apprenticeship is key to us. Local hires, and that's tremendous. The historical aspect of it, I think it's also an important part, and the extension of the trail. So with that, Madam Mayor, I will move on the staff's recommendation.
All right. Is there a second to that motion? Council member.
Second it.
Oh, okay. Council member. Okay. The motion is made by Council Member Zermano to support the staff recommendation, seconded by Council Member Lamnin and Council Member Marquez.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a quick question for staff. I apologize that I didn't ask earlier. Who's going to be responsible for selecting the design and the ultimate placement of the signage? Mainly the gateway sign that we've been talking about, not necessarily the signs that the Historical Society is going to work with the U-Haul team to develop.
That's a really good question. That it's at this point, it's the space has been allocated and they're contributing, but really this would be a city project and it would have to be, we'd get multiple departments and divisions involved and likely have lots of different people weighing in. And so I think at this point it was sort of a good opportunity to ask for this without a project, envisioned yet.
And I would just say that a gateway sign of this magnitude will be much more costly than, usually gateway signs somewhere in the magnitude of $500,000, especially if you want something that is prominent enough to be seen as you're coming off the freeway. So would probably be something that would come back through, the Economic Development Department, along with our Community and Media Relations team, and probably back to the Economic Development Committee or Infrastructure Committee.
Thank you. That's what I was going to recommend, Infrastructure Committee, or just really any opportunity to get the public to weigh in. And if we could present options, if we get to that stage, would be helpful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Wahab.
Thank you. Granted what Dr. Silva stated, I kind of just want to ask staff, can you guys reiterate some of the corrections that this team has made regarding the environmental aspects?
So the Ed Yarborough spoke about the different stipulations. And I think that what his presentation mainly spoke about, I'll just briefly say, is about the setting and preserving the setting. While, it's a 30-acre site and they're developing on a very small portion of it, that a lot of the strategies that they're using are to retain and display and reuse some of the materials on site and then leave the rest of the site untouched. I see that Hope Kingma is raising her hand and she's part of the development team, so she might have more to add.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and City Council members. I'm working on this project. I've actually been involved with this project for the last decade. And I think it's important for everyone to understand that this project is also being reviewed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for impacts to wetlands, the Regional Water Quality Control Board for impacts to waters of the state, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for impacts to species that are protected pursuant to the Federal Endangered Species Act. And so there's a lot of other additional outside oversight and permits that will need to be obtained to authorize this project if it were to move forward. And both the Corps and the Regional Water Quality Control Board have indicated that they're supportive of the project and the proposed mitigation for impacts to waters of the U.S. and state. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, in fact, is the one that required that the 32 acres be preserved in perpetuity by a conservation easement. And there will be a conservator that will be responsible for ensuring its long-term maintenance and monitoring of that preserve area in perpetuity. And in order to do that, they'll be provided with an endowment. So I just wanted to assure everyone that there's a lot of additional oversight and authorization that's going into this project that really will preserve the habitat value for birders and for the endangered species, regardless of whether or not people are there. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay. I really appreciate that. And I understand the concerns there. And, I was one of the ones who last time even said that if I would prefer that no development takes place in anywhere close to our shoreline, if you will. But we also know that that's not realistic as much as possible. But, one of the things I would suggest is that if for the owner and Mr. Owen, I appreciate, you taking into consideration some of the comments that were made last time, as well as even having a conversation. And I know I met with you in, I want to say fall-ish, right? And just how much this project has come along, if you will. Just trying to make sure that the space that you guys are not utilizing, that is not a place where, people are just roaming and just tossing trash and doing XYZ. If you can just make sure that property's upkept, and obviously there's some restrictions there already. But just making sure that is a huge concern to, I'm going to say this full council, but also the city as a whole, the environmental aspect, as well as just our shoreline in particular is, a treasure, right? And so, I drove yesterday from Menlo Park. I took the bridge and, this building is a dilapidated building. Let's not kid ourselves. It should be destroyed completely and so forth. But, and there has been no usage for years and years and years. So I'm happy that this building will be coming up. But I do just want to really, really significantly talk about the environmental aspect is probably one of the most important pieces of this land. And that's why you've had so much difficulty. So just moving forward as you take over, all of this and the project moves forward, that you just keep a consistent eye on the full body of the property. That's all I can ask at this point. But I do appreciate you taking into consideration all of the many, many things that were thrown your way. I really do appreciate you also working with our local labor folks. This does bring in jobs and allows people to kind of learn and grow as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Lamnon?
I just had a quick question and then a short comment. The question is, for our motion, did we need to indicate the correction that you noted?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay.
The third of 1%, not 0.3 of a.
Yeah. So I'm seeing Councilmember Zermenio nod.
3%, 30%.
So the staff recommendation as amended. Excellent. And then just wanted to echo Councilmember Wahab's comments about appreciation of Mr. Owen and your team in really being a true partner in our community. What we've learned is that if we want to reach our environmental goals, we need to invest and make sure that habitats get restored, that habitats get monitored and protected. If we want good labor jobs, we need employers willing to work in partnership with our labor community. If we want historical preservation, once again, we need partnership. And so I appreciate that you have been that partner throughout this process, and look forward to seeing this project come to fruition. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Councilmember Andrews.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation, and just wanted to ask again, how many jobs are going to be at this facility again, ongoing, not construction?
Applicant estimated about 50.
50. Okay. So I would say that, I'm not excited about U-Haul being the gateway to our city. I'm going to acknowledge that. But at the same time, having 50 people versus literally hundreds of people in a building in this area is probably better in this particular location. It will be less cars that are going to this facility on a daily basis. So I'm hoping that we can just acknowledge that as well. And then I do think the art needs some work. I think we need to definitely even look at some of the placards. It doesn't really look that inviting to me, but that's like subjective, and you all can figure out the best people to work with to make that better. But we just want to make sure that it's not something that if people do walk by that they're not going to acknowledge because it's not attractive. They're not going to learn because they're not paying attention because they walk right by it. So hopefully we can figure out something that is more enticing. So other than that, again, I want to make sure that staff, when projects come in this area, we really do make sure that this is what we should be doing. I'm very concerned about the shoreline as well. But, this is probably the least intensive use that I can think of for this area. And we do need to tear that building down. That building is also a health and safety issue and an eyesore, in addition to being an eyesore. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Salinas.
Yeah, I just, wanted to acknowledge the partnership that, U-Haul has with our labor community. I think that's important. I wanted to thank Tony Munoz and the Carpenters for calling in and expressing their support. It's good to see that. It's good to see that one of the things that we asked for, back in December, that they did it. They went and they honored that. So I appreciate that. I have to agree. Would I have wanted to see something else out here? Perhaps. And, I think over the years, the council has had, we have a vision for our industrial sector, and so I just, I'm mindful of keeping our eye on our vision that we have come together on. And so I just wanted to make that point. And I also, agree with the comment about, all the signage, artwork. I'm sure that is a process, and I look forward to it coming to CDEC, infrastructure, and the one thing I just really want to impress upon U-Haul. This is Hayward's gateway, and this is the first thing people are going to see when they come off the bridge. And, and so this is important. And, I understand we have a building there. We all agree, needs to come down, and we've been looking at it for a long, long time. And, but conversely, this is our gateway, and we really, really need to make it spectacular. And with all of the elements that we've articulated, I'm not going to talk about all that now, but, I'm really looking forward to working with you in our committees and really putting together something that really represents the city as people come into our city and into our city. So thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you all for the comments. And I'll just say I do appreciate the work that's gone into this since the last time we saw it. I think it's sharp. We really responded to our input, and I am excited about the about truly adding to the knowledge about the salt industry out there with the signage. Councilmember Andrews, I don't know that you would call those signs art. I mean, it's trail signage, right? And it's similar. What he showed was very similar to what is already, the signs that are on the other side of 92. I actually don't know that the trail on the south side of 92 is not one I know nearly as well as on the north side. But I always appreciate the signage that they have put out there hard, I think. And when you're on the trail, well, if you've read it before, you might not stop, but usually I always stop to read the signs on nature trails. And I like the idea of using the lumber I hope that they'll mention that on the sign, but, to the point of, make them as attractive as you can. And I trust working with Ms. Curry from the Historical Society that, we can get to something that's pleasing, but also informative. And I'll just weigh in right now on it. It struck me that the westernmost area for the gateway sign would be the best, since people coming across the bridge would see that sooner. But there might be, I don't know, there might be reasons to put it at the other end, but it just seems to me that would be the place to put it. And I'm really shocked at the city manager's comment that such a sign could cost as much as $500,000. Really? I mean,
yeah, when I worked in the city of Fremont 20 years ago, we put in monument signs and they were $350,000 then. I mean, they're big. They have a lot of materials, so they are pricey.
Wow. Okay. Well, it is our gateway, as Councilmember Salinas pointed out, and we do want it to look good, but we'll have to be, we'll really have to be thinking about that. So I think there are grants out there for public art, though. That's where we can really, put the good, the attractive art image up, maybe. But with that, I'm going to join in supporting this motion. I really appreciate the, Mr. Owen and your team following up on the suggestions we had in December. And I think it will be a good change for everybody in Hayward, not to see that building that is crumbling anymore, but to see something newer and more attractive. Plus, hopefully, a really nice, however expensive it is, gateway sign to welcome people into our city. So with that, on this motion, and then I just want to make sure all of the things that were feasible. I know you mentioned a couple of things that we had talked about that, were not recommended or were not feasible. And I think we mostly understand that, but the things that the conditions of approval now have been updated, and the only correction we need to make, the only alteration would be that 3% mathematical mistake more than a typo. It's a mathematical. I had to think about that. Wait a minute. It's because 1% is 0.01. I mean, sorry. Yeah. So anyway, if you make that, so on this motion by Councilmember Zermeño and seconded by Councilmember Lamnin, Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Aye.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez.
Aye.
Councilmember Salinas.
Yes.
Councilmember Wahab.
Yes.
Councilmember Zermeño.
Aye.
Mayor Halliday.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the motion carries with 7 aye votes. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. And
thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing it go up. Okay. With that, that brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, which is our last major item. Is there anyone in need of a break of a few minutes right now? Yes. Okay. We will take no. All right. No, I'm seeing no's now. Okay. All right. We will plow ahead then. No one is in desperate need of taking a break. So we will move on to item number 6, which is adoption of a resolution approving an amendment to the City of Hayward salary plan for fiscal year 2022.
Yes. No, I'm kidding.
And anybody who talks a long time about this is going to be in trouble because I think, okay. And with that in mind, Ms. Sangi, are you going to go ahead and do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. I'll try to be thorough but brief. Let me share my screen with you. As I mentioned, we are here to recommend the council adopts a resolution approving the amendment to the City of Hayward salary plan for the fiscal year 2022. The updates were made to the salary plan to reflect cost of living adjustments bargained with HAME, the additions of 2 positions at the maintenance service department, and 3 other salary adjustments throughout the city. Thank you. So for HAME, back in December 2021, we reached an agreement that included a 1% increase for fiscal year 2022. The total fiscal impact is $106,290. The effective date will be the date of the TA in December 2021. And it's split between the general fund and other funds. For new classifications that were added to the salary plan, we have 2 at the maintenance service department, the landscape maintenance supervisor and the street maintenance supervisor. They are added to the salary plan. There's no recruitment timeline for these positions yet. The funding will be discussed during the budget process for the fiscal year 2023 for these positions. We also include 3 salary adjustments in the salary plan. The first one for our communications and marketing officer. The proposed increase is 8%. There's no fiscal impact since it was included in the adopted budget for the fiscal year 2022. This comes forth as a recommendation based on the market study that was conducted for the position in March of 2020. The second salary adjustment will be for the hazmat program coordinator and proposed increase of 3.21%, fiscal impact of $6,362 to the general fund. And this is set so that we would maintain the 10% differential dictated by the MOU between supervisor and their highest paid subordinate, and would be effective as of August 16, 2021. Last but not least, we are proposing an increase of 0.99% to the senior civil engineer. The fiscal impact will be $6,323 to the general fund. And that is done in order to maintain our internal settings and the differential between the senior civil engineer and the associate engineer. So that concludes my presentation, and I am opening up for questions for council.
Okay. I don't see any questions. So I will move on and open it up for public comment. Any members of the public who are still with us? And there are fewer than there were a few minutes ago. And I am not seeing any hands going up there. So I'll close public comment and go back to council. Councilmember Salinas.
Yes, I have 73 minutes worth of questions.
And we will move on to the next person then.
No, I'd like to move the item.
I'll second Marquez.
Okay, the item has been staff recommendation moved by Councilmember Salinas, seconded by Councilmember Marquez. Any discussion? Seeing no hands up, Madam City Clerk, will you call the roll?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Andrews.
Aye.
Councilmember Lamnin.
Aye.
Councilmember Marquez.
I just want to appreciate staff for their hard work with labor negotiations this past year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Salinas.
Yes.
Councilmember Wahab.
Yes.
Councilmember Cermeño.
Gee.
Mayor Halliday.
Yes. And the motion passes with 7 aye votes. And thank you, Ms. Sangi. That was very well done there. Very expeditiously done. Okay. But I think that I will say that the council, spends a lot of time on the budget, and this has been discussed previously. So we aren't just glossing over it. But thank you, everyone. That brings us actually to council reports and announcements. Anything? Well, the hour is late. I'm not seeing any hands going up. And so tonight we will, I will now adjourn the meeting, and our next meeting is next week, February 22nd at 7 p.m. And so until then, thank you all and good night.